In this video, we're going through 3 hours of classic SpongeBob theories that'll keep your brain turning while you drift off. But before we begin, I'd just like to kindly ask you all to subscribe. It's completely free and it really helps us improve the videos for this wonderful community we've managed to build. Anyway, that's enough, let's begin. The Goo Lagoon Brine Pool Theory. Alright, let's talk about one of the most aggressively confusing things in cartoon history. SpongeBob SquarePants casually introduced us to Goo Lagoon, a beach that exists at the bottom of the ocean, and expected us to just roll with it like we're all collectively sharing the same fever dream. The French narrator himself drops this bomb in ripped pants with zero hesitation. He literally calls it a stinky mud puddle and moves on like he's describing the weather. Meanwhile, we're watching SpongeBob and Sandy sunbathe, build sandcastles, and swim in what appears to be water while already surrounded by water. The show treats this like it's the most normal thing in the world. Everyone's out here playing volleyball, surfing actual waves, and getting knocked around by currents that have absolutely zero business existing hundreds of feet below the ocean surface. The whole episode revolves around SpongeBob desperately trying to impress Sandy at this impossible beach location. Larry the Lobster shows up looking like he bench presses cruise ships for fun, Sandy's over there lifting anchors like they're made of styrofoam, and SpongeBob's struggling with a twig holding 2 marshmallows. The man has to borrow the marshmallows from some random guy's picnic, by the way. Peak desperation hours. Scooter keeps slapping SpongeBob on the back every time he rips his pants. Sandy's doing handstands on surfboards, and there's apparently a sports broadcaster calling the action from some kind of booth overlooking the entire lagoon. A broadcasting booth underwater. Perch Perkins is literally doing commentary on surfing conditions at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. Here's where the science actually gets wild though. Goo Lagoon might be based on a real phenomenon called brine pools. These are areas on the ocean floor where super concentrated saltwater collects, and because this brine is so much denser than the surrounding seawater, it forms a completely separate layer that looks and acts like its own body of liquid. From the perspective of deep-sea creatures, these brine pools literally appear to be lakes or beaches beneath the ocean. The water sits on top of more water because physics said, why should things make sense down here anyway? Scientists have filmed underwater lakes with shorelines, waves, and everything. Sea creatures have been observed swimming in these brine pools like they're taking a dip at a resort. The ocean basically said, what if beach, but again? The immediate reaction from anyone paying attention should be complete cognitive meltdown. SpongeBob and his friends breathe water. They live in water. Their entire existence happens inside water. So what exactly are they swimming in at Goo Lagoon? If it's regular ocean water, the beach concept makes absolutely zero sense. These characters should experience Goo Lagoon the same way they experience walking down the street. The fact that they treat it as a special recreational destination where they can wade into the shallows and splash around suggests the liquid there operates on completely different rules than their normal environment. The brine pool explanation actually holds up surprisingly well. Real brine pools are toxic to most marine life because the salt concentration is so extreme. Fish that swim into them can go into shock, and plenty of deep-sea creatures have been found dead around the edges of these underwater lakes. The residents of Bikini Bottom, presumably mutated by nuclear testing into sentient beings, might have evolved some kind of tolerance or immunity that lets them enjoy these deadly chemical pools recreationally. Where a normal fish would dissolve, SpongeBob does backflips. Larry the Lobster does his trademark layback on a surfboard riding waves that mathematically should be impossible at these depths. The stinky mud puddle description from the French narrator actually supports this theory perfectly. Brine pools often form near methane seeps and other geological features that release gases and minerals into the water. These areas smell terrible by human standards, producing sulfuric and otherwise unpleasant odors from the chemical reactions happening at the seafloor. The narrator calling Goo Lagoon stinky suggests he's aware of its actual composition. He's giving us a scientific hint wrapped in comedic delivery, and we all just laughed and moved on to watch SpongeBob embarrass himself for 20 minutes. The lifeguard situation adds another layer of absurdity that somehow circles back to making sense. Larry works as a lifeguard at Goo Lagoon, which means his job involves saving aquatic creatures from drowning in a substance that exists underwater. If Goo Lagoon is a brine pool, this actually tracks. The extreme density and chemical composition could absolutely be dangerous to breathe, even for creatures adapted to normal seawater. Larry's lifeguard duties would involve pulling people out of a toxic soup before they inhale too much concentrated salt solution. His job is real, his danger is real, and the show played it completely straight while we assumed it was just another visual gag. The sunbathing element opens up even more questions. Characters at Goo Lagoon apply sunscreen, lay out on towels, and visibly tan over the course of beach episodes. Sunlight at the ocean floor would be virtually non-existent, filtered through hundreds of feet of water until only the faintest traces remain. Either Bikini Bottom exists at a much shallower depth than actual Bikini Atoll would suggest, or the sun these characters experience operates through mechanisms we can only guess at. Some fans have theorized that bioluminescent organisms in the upper water column create a diffuse glow that Bikini Bottom residents evolved to perceive as sunlight. Others suggest the nuclear testing that created their society also punched holes in normal light absorption patterns. The show gives us zero answers, naturally. The long-term implications of Goo Lagoon, existing the way it does, basically confirm that Bikini Bottom operates outside any recognizable version of reality. This is a place where fire burns underwater, where characters can somehow drown despite being fish, where clouds form in the sky, and rain falls on beachgoers who are already submerged in an ocean. The show established all of this in its second episode, and then proceeded to build an entire mythology around locations and physics that treat the laws of nature as loose suggestions. Every future episode where something impossible happens got its permission slip signed by Goo Lagoon. You want to question how a character dried out despite living in water? Goo Lagoon already established that liquids work differently here. Confused about how a bonfire keeps burning at the bottom of the sea? The brine pool broke the rules first. Everything after that is just collateral damage. The beach became the template for every scientific impossibility the show would ever commit, and it happened while SpongeBob was desperately ripping his pants for attention at a surfing competition that took place on waves generated by nothing, judged by announcers who somehow have television equipment functional at crushing ocean depths. Goo Lagoon walked so every underwater explosion could run. Let's move on to the next theory. The chum bucket arms dealing theory. Let's address the elephant in the room that everyone who's ever watched SpongeBob has somehow ignored for over 2 decades. The chum bucket has 0 customers. Literally 0. The restaurant makes absolutely no money, serves food that causes immediate physical revulsion, and sits in the worst possible location directly across from the most successful fast food establishment in Bikini Bottom. By every conceivable metric of business operation, the chum bucket should have closed approximately 25 years ago. Plankton somehow keeps the lights on, maintains sophisticated laboratory equipment, and bankrolls increasingly elaborate schemes to steal a hamburger recipe. The math here is giving forensic accountant nightmare fuel. Plankton's army gives us our clearest window into just how absurd Plankton's resources actually are. This episode opens with Mr. Planked, Krabs celebrating the 25th anniversary of Plankton's first attempt to steal the Krabby Patty formula, meaning Plankton has been running a failed restaurant for a quarter-century minimum. 25 years of rent, utilities, equipment maintenance, and whatever Karen's electricity bill looks like. The chum bucket sits on prime commercial real estate directly on the main road of Bikini Bottom. Property taxes alone should have bankrupted him 15 times over, yet here he is, casually building robots sophisticated enough to fool Mr. Krabs, complete with laser beam eyes that can melt through solid walls. The robot customer scene deserves its own forensic analysis. Plankton constructs an autonomous humanoid machine capable of independent navigation, natural speech patterns, financial transactions, and military-grade laser weaponry. This thing walks into the Krusty Krab, orders food, pays with real currency that Plankton is hiding inside, by the way, which means he had $1 to spare on this scheme, and then casually melts the door frame on its way out. We're talking about engineering that would make DARPA weep with jealousy. The Pentagon would write blank checks for a fraction of this technology. Plankton built it to buy chili coral bits as a distraction. Karen herself represents the single most advanced piece of artificial intelligence in the entire SpongeBob universe. She has genuine emotions, complex personality traits, the ability to learn and adapt, and she runs the entire chum bucket infrastructure autonomously. Creating an AI like Karen would require computational resources, programming expertise, and hardware development that rivals anything produced by the largest tech corporations on the surface world. Plankton apparently designed and built her himself, in the back of a restaurant that has never successfully sold a meal. The chum bucket's technology budget exceeds its food budget by approximately infinity%. When Plankton's initial robot scheme fails and he ends up flush down the toilet again, we get a rare glimpse into his actual living situation. The chum bucket interior houses massive computer systems, laboratory equipment, and enough space to accommodate what appears to be an unlimited number of relatives. The building functions as a restaurant, a home, a research facility, and eventually a military staging ground. Commercial properties, this versatile, require serious investment, and Plankton treats it all like a minor inconvenience between schemes. His reaction to failure is annoyance, never financial panic. He has never once worried about making rent. The family reunion sequence accidentally reveals the full scope of Plankton's operation. He contacts relatives across the entire ocean using multiple communication methods: phone calls, written letters, and skywriting via personal aircraft. Plankton owns a plane, a functioning airplane that he can pilot. The man who cannot successfully sell a single hamburger has access to aviation technology. He uses it to write messages in the sky, recruiting family members for a heist. This is the behavior of someone with essentially unlimited discretionary income. Someone whose restaurant income of $0 per year somehow covers airplane ownership and maintenance. The felicitations. Malefactors seen at the Tough Guy bar accidentally confirms that Plankton has been shopping for muscle before. He knows where the criminal underworld hangs out. He walks into a bar full of dangerous lowlifes with complete confidence that money can solve his personnel problems. His pitch fails because of vocabulary issues, not because anyone questions his ability to pay. The criminal element of Bikini Bottom apparently knows Plankton as someone who can fund operations. They just think he talks weird. His cousins eventually demand payment for their assistance. New banjo strings, a matching boot, laptop memory upgrades, and unlimited root beer. These are the requests of people who expect Plankton to deliver. They traveled from across the ocean based on the assumption that cousin Sheldon could afford to compensate them. Extended family doesn't mobilize for a broke relative. They came because the Plankton name carries financial weight somewhere, even if that somewhere has nothing to do with the restaurant industry. The safe-cracking sequence showcases yet another impossible capability. Plankton's relatives can form complex shapes through coordination and accomplish tasks, requiring fine motor control and specialized knowledge. They crack Mr. Krabs is safe using what appears to be professional safe-cracking technique. Either Plankton trained them during the brief period between their arrival and the heist, or the Plankton family has prior experience with this exact type of criminal activity. Career criminals need funding between jobs. Someone is paying these people to exist, and the chum bucket menu is not generating that revenue. The weapons manufacturing theory ties everything together with uncomfortable neatness. Plankton possesses the engineering capability to build robots, AI systems, laser weapons, shrinking rays, mind control devices, and countless other technologies throughout the series. He has connections to the criminal underworld. He maintains expensive real estate and equipment with zero legitimate income. He can mobilize resources across ocean-wide distances at a moment's notice. The Chum Bucket provides a perfect front, a failing restaurant that no one visits, run by a guy everyone dismisses as a joke. Health inspectors probably don't even bother checking the back rooms anymore. Who would suspect that Bikini Bottom's most pathetic business owner operates an international arms-dealing network from his basement? The Krabby Patty obsession suddenly makes more strategic sense through this lens. The formula is about proving capability to whoever funds Plankton's actual operation. Stealing the most protected secret in Bikini Bottom would demonstrate infiltration skills, resource management, and the ability to accomplish impossible tasks. Every failed scheme is essentially a resume builder. Every elaborate robot and complex plan shows potential clients what Plankton can construct when properly motivated. The formula itself might be worthless to his backers. The process of stealing it proves he's worth continued investment. 25 years of failure haven't produced a single consequence for Plankton's lifestyle. He still owns the building. He still maintains the equipment. He still launches schemes that cost more than most residents earn in a lifetime. The Chum Bucket survives because the Chum Bucket was never meant to succeed as a restaurant. The food is bad on purpose. The location is bad on purpose. Everything about the legitimate business side screams, "Please ignore me," while the basement hums with technology that shouldn't exist. Plankton plays the fool because fools don't get investigated. His 25th anniversary of failure is actually his 25th anniversary of perfect cover maintenance. The Chum Bucket is the most successful front operation in Bikini Bottom history, and the only person who seems even slightly suspicious is a crab too obsessed with his own secrets to look closely at anyone else's. Alright, on to the next theory. The living pineapple theory. SpongeBob SquarePants lives inside a fruit. This fact gets glossed over approximately every single episode because the show has conditioned us to accept that a sea sponge wearing pants inhabits a pineapple at the bottom of the ocean like that's just normal real estate. The theme song announces it, the establishing shots confirm it, and everyone moves on with their lives. Here's the thing though. That pineapple behaves less like a house and more like a living organism that has formed some kind of deeply codependent relationship with its yellow occupant. Home Sweet Pineapple provides the smoking gun for this theory, and the evidence is frankly disturbing once you start paying attention. The episode opens with nematodes, tiny parasitic worms, for those keeping track of the marine biology, literally drinking SpongeBob's house through straws. They consume the entire structure like a smoothie. The walls shrink, the furniture disappears, the rooms compress, and eventually the whole pineapple gets slurped down to nothing. SpongeBob wakes up during this process thinking he and Gary have grown huge, which is adorable and also deeply concerning about his spatial awareness. By the time the nematodes finish their meal, the only thing remaining is a single seed sitting in the dirt where a fully furnished multi-room home used to exist. Let that sink in for a moment. The nematodes drank the house. They consumed it as food. Buildings made of wood, stone, or any other construction material cannot be consumed by parasitic worms. The nematodes treated the pineapple exactly how real nematodes would treat actual organic matter, as nutrition. SpongeBob's house has biological properties. It can be eaten because it's made of something edible, something alive. The reconstruction sequence at the end of the episode transforms this theory from speculation into near certainty. SpongeBob buries the seed, which he initially mistakes for a pebble, because apparently seeds and pebbles look identical when you're emotionally devastated, in the exact spot where his house used to stand. One of his tears falls onto the buried seed. The ground starts shaking, a massive stem erupts from the soil, and a fully formed pineapple house drops into place exactly where the original stood. The stem retracts into the ground, and SpongeBob runs inside to find everything restored. His furniture, his belongings, Gary's food bowl, all of it. The house grew back from a seed in approximately 15 seconds. Houses built by contractors require permits, materials, labor, and months of construction time. SpongeBob's pineapple required one seed, one tear, and the apparent will to exist. The pineapple regenerated itself, complete with interior decorating. The seed contained genetic information for a library, a bedroom, a kitchen, and functional plumbing. Either this is the most sophisticated piece of biotechnology in cartoon history, or SpongeBob's house is a sentient organism that remembers its previous configuration and chooses to rebuild itself whenever destroyed. The tear detail matters more than the show wants us to think about. SpongeBob cries onto the seed during a moment of genuine emotional devastation. He's losing his home, saying goodbye to his friends, and preparing to move back in with his parents. The tear represents pure, concentrated SpongeBob emotion, and the seed responds to it immediately. The house only regenerates when SpongeBob provides biological input through direct contact with his bodily fluids. The pineapple needs something from SpongeBob to activate. It feeds on his emotional state. This creates an uncomfortable framework for understanding their entire relationship. SpongeBob treats his house with obsessive care throughout the series. He cleans it constantly, talks to it affectionately, and experiences genuine distress whenever it faces any threat. His attachment seems excessive for a building, even a nice one. The pineapple, in return, provides shelter that adapts to his needs, regenerates when damaged, and apparently stores memories of its own interior layout across death and rebirth cycles. SpongeBob gives the pineapple love and attention. The pineapple gives SpongeBob a home that literally cannot be permanently destroyed. Symbiosis in its most unsettling real estate form. Patrick's observation during the reconstruction attempt accidentally highlights what makes SpongeBob's pineapple unique. Patrick says he built his own house, and his rock's antenna immediately falls off. Patrick's rock is just a rock. It requires no maintenance because it has no complexity. Squidward's Easter Island head house is similarly static, a structure that exists and nothing more. SpongeBob's pineapple operates on completely different rules. When SpongeBob and Patrick try to build a replacement house manually, the result is a tiny structure that falls apart the moment SpongeBob tries to enter it. Conventional construction methods produce conventional results. The original pineapple transcends conventional anything. The interior inconsistencies across different episodes suddenly make sense through this lens. SpongeBob's house has different numbers of rooms depending on the episode. The layout shifts, new features appear and disappear. Animation errors? Sure, if you want to take the boring route. The living house theory suggests the pineapple reconfigures itself based on SpongeBob's current needs. He needs a library for an episode about reading, and a library appears. He needs extra space for guests, and the rooms expand. The pineapple responds to its occupant, because its occupant is the source of its continued existence. The nematodes choosing to drink specifically SpongeBob's house raises additional questions. They pass other structures on their way through Bikini Bottom. They eat a truck, which makes sense. Vehicles contain consumable materials. They target the pineapple specifically because it's the most nutritious thing in the area. A living, growing, emotionally sustained organism would contain far more biological energy than any dead structure. The nematodes found the one house in Bikini Bottom that would actually taste good, and they drained it completely. SpongeBob's neighbors remain unaffected because their homes are just buildings. SpongeBob's home was alive, and that made it delicious. The theory reframes SpongeBob's entire domestic situation as something between pet ownership and a long-term committed relationship. He lives inside something that depends on him for emotional sustenance and rewards him with unconditional shelter and regeneration capabilities. The pineapple dropped from above before the series began, confirmed in other episodes where we see it fall from a boat and land on Squidward's garden. It chose its location, or perhaps it chose SpongeBob. A symbiotic organism seeking a compatible host would naturally gravitate toward the most emotionally generous creature in the area. SpongeBob SquarePants, a being made of pure optimism and friendship capacity, represents the ideal food source for something that feeds on positive emotional energy. Every time SpongeBob walks through his front door and sighs contentedly about being home, he's feeding his house. Every time he tells Gary how much he loves living there, he's providing sustenance to an organism that will literally grow back from the dead to keep housing him. The pineapple under the sea is alive, It's hungry for SpongeBob's emotional output, and it has arranged their entire relationship to ensure a steady supply of exactly what it needs. SpongeBob thinks he owns a house. The house might actually own him. Okay, next theory coming up. If you're enjoying the video so far, subscribe to our channel. The Mermaid Man power degradation theory. Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy live in a retirement home. This is played for laughs throughout the series because watching elderly superheroes struggle to remember basic information while SpongeBob fanboys over them creates easy comedic contrast. The show wants us to chuckle at the absurdity of once great heroes reduced to arguing over checkers and forgetting who's on the phone. Here's the darker reading that the fanbase has been kicking around for years. Mermaid Man's mental deterioration follows a suspiciously specific pattern that suggests his powers are literally eating his brain from the inside out. Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy establishes the baseline for this theory in its opening minutes. The episode begins with footage of young Mermaid Man in his prime, flying through the water with Barnacle Boy at his side, summoning sea creatures, creating whirlpools, and generally operating as a fully functional superhero with complete command of his abilities. The TV announcer describes him as fleet and forceful, with the ability to assemble and charge the creatures of the deep. This is a being with genuine supernatural power over marine life and water itself. Cut to present day, and the same man hangs off a water fountain screaming about death rays while nursing home staff shake their heads in disappointment. The memory loss pattern tells the real story. Mermaid Man can recall his glory days with perfect clarity. When SpongeBob recounts the story about Man Ray and the growth ray gun and the Atlantis food supply crisis, Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy follow along without confusion. They remember their villains, their adventures, their techniques. The superhero memories remain intact. Everything else has turned to mush. Mermaid Man forgets who Barnacle Boy is mid-conversation. He thinks SpongeBob is a TV repairman. He holds a phone upside down and can't figure out why no one's talking. He pronounces SpongeBob and Patrick man and wife during what he apparently believes is a wedding ceremony happening in the middle of his meatloaf lunch. This selective degradation points towards something more sinister than standard aging. Normal dementia doesn't preserve specific categories of memory while obliterating everything else. Mermaid Man's brain has essentially been rewired to prioritize superhero-related information at the expense of basic daily functioning. The neural pathways associated with his powers remain strong, because those pathways have been reinforced through decades of supernatural usage. The neural pathways associated with normal human cognition have been crowded out, burned through, or simply abandoned as his brain devoted more and more resources to maintaining his abilities. The evil response demonstrates this perfectly. SpongeBob casually mentions that there's evil afoot, and Mermaid Man immediately launches into full combat mode, running around the retirement home, screaming and treating a water fountain like a supervillain. His threat detection systems work flawlessly. The part of his brain responsible for identifying and responding to evil activates instantly with zero degradation. The part of his brain responsible for recognizing that a water fountain poses no actual danger has completely failed. He's essentially become a superhero reflex machine with no higher reasoning left to contextualize those reflexes. Barnacle Boy's comparatively better mental state supports the theory through contrast. Barnacle Boy served as the sidekick for their entire career. He used his powers less frequently, took supporting roles in major conflicts, and generally let Mermaid Man absorb the brunt of every battle. If superhero abilities cause cumulative neurological damage, Barnacle Boy would have accumulated less damage through reduced usage. He's irritable. He's tired of being called boy after decades of sidekick status, but he can hold conversations, remember context, and function as something resembling a normal elderly person. Mermaid Man, the primary hero who channeled the most power through his body over the longest period, shows dramatically more severe cognitive decline. The ring ceremony offers another window into the deterioration. Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy attempt to unite their rings, the gesture that activates their combined powers. They miss each other completely on the first try. They have to wave their arms around to synchronize their positioning before attempting again. These two performed this exact motion countless times over their careers, probably thousands of attempts at ring unification in combat situations where split-second timing meant the difference between victory and defeat. The muscle memory should be permanent. Their bodies remember the motion, but the coordination required to execute it has decayed. The power still exists, the knowledge of how to use it remains, but the bridge between intention and action has eroded. When they finally manage to throw a water ball at SpongeBob, the attack works mechanically, but fails practically because SpongeBob absorbs water. Mermaid Man's immediate conclusion is that SpongeBob must be some kind of evil sponge absorbing their attack through villainy. The logical explanation sponges absorb liquid, this is literally what they do, never occurs to him. His threat assessment programming kicks in automatically, but his reasoning ability can't process the obvious solution. The superhero brain works. The regular brain has checked out. The sea creature summoning at the episode's climax reveals how far the degradation extends beyond just Mermaid Man. When they call for backup, the creatures of the deep that respond are other elderly residents of the retirement home, shuffling outside with walkers and canes. These might actually be former sea creatures who answered previous summons decades ago and simply never recovered. The implication is that anyone who gets too close to Mermaid Man's power eventually ends up in the same facility, their minds and bodies worn down by exposure to abilities that were never meant for sustained use. The retirement home itself takes on a more sinister purpose through this lens. Shady Shoals Rest Home might exist specifically to contain and monitor individuals whose powers have made them dangerous to themselves and others. The caretaker knows exactly how to handle Mermaid Man's outbursts. The staff seems prepared for random combat scenarios breaking out in the cafeteria. This facility has protocols for superhero management. Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy ended up here because their powers require institutional supervision, with their heroic careers concluding the moment they became more liability than asset. The new Adventures TV show at the episode's end drives home how complete the deterioration has become. Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy's exciting new content involves playing checkers, answering a phone incorrectly, and forgetting what they were supposed to remember. The announcer asks whether they'll ever get their phone fixed, and the honest answer is probably no. They become entertainment for an audience that finds their decline amusing rather than tragic. SpongeBob watches with genuine enthusiasm because he can't recognize the horror of what he's actually seeing. Two heroes whose powers gave them everything and then took everything back with interest. Let's jump into the next theory. The magic conch deity theory. SpongeBob and Patrick own a toy called the magic conch shell. You pull a string, it gives you an answer, and the joke is that two idiots treat a cheap piece of plastic like an oracle. That's the surface level reading, and it's funny enough to carry an 11-minute episode. The deeper reading, the one that fans have been chewing on for years, suggests that the magic conch shell operates as an actual divine entity with genuine supernatural authority over the physical world. The toy explanation falls apart the moment you start tracking what the shell actually accomplishes. Club SpongeBob establishes the conch's power immediately through SpongeBob and Patrick's absolute devotion. These two have been stuck in a treehouse for 3 days because the shell told them to do nothing, and they obeyed without question. 3 days of sitting in a cramped space with no food or water because a toy told them to stay put. SpongeBob describes the club's relationship with the conch in explicitly religious language. We must never question the wisdom of the magic conch, and the club always takes its advice before we do anything. Patrick adds, the shell knows all. This goes beyond toy enthusiasm. This is worship protocol. Squidward joins the club involuntarily when he climbs into the treehouse and accidentally launches all 3 of them into the kelp forest. Now stranded in a genuinely dangerous wilderness situation, the rational response would be to seek shelter, find food, and navigate towards civilization. SpongeBob asks the conch what they need to do to escape. The conch says, nothing. SpongeBob and Patrick immediately sit down and enter a state of complete stillness, refusing to move, speak, or respond to Squidward's increasingly desperate pleas. They have received their instructions and they will comply. Squidward, operating as the voice of reason, a phrase that should terrify anyone familiar with Squidward's actual decision-making capabilities, rejects the shell and ventures into the forest alone. He gets hopelessly lost, runs in circles, and eventually ends up right back where he started. The kelp forest defeats the one person who refused to follow the conch's guidance. Meanwhile, SpongeBob and Patrick sit motionless, protected by their obedience. The miracle happens when Squidward, having caught a bug and started cooking it over a fire, mocks the shell worshippers for believing that answers will fall right out of the sky. An airplane immediately begins falling right out of the sky. The pilot screams that they need to drop the load, presses a button, and a complete picnic feast of food and supplies lands directly on SpongeBob and Patrick's location. Spaghetti, turkey, soup, canned meat, soda, ketchup, cookies, orange juice, smoked sausages, sandwiches, and everything else you could want for a wilderness survival scenario. The conch said to do nothing, and doing nothing resulted in divine providence delivering a banquet. The timing here deserves scrutiny. The airplane wasn't already falling. The supplies weren't already being dropped. Squidward specifically challenged the conch's authority by sarcastically suggesting that the answers would fall from the sky, and the universe immediately arranged for exactly that to happen. The conch heard the mockery and responded with a demonstration of power. SpongeBob and Patrick recognize this instantly, praise the magic conch, followed by their victory screech. They understand that they have witnessed intervention from their deity. The conch then demonstrates the flip side of divine authority, punishment for the unfaithful. Squidward, starving after days in the forest while SpongeBob and Patrick feasted, finally humbles himself and asks the conch for permission to eat. The conch denies him. Spaghetti? Neither. Turkey? Neither. Soup? I don't think so. Anything at all? No. Squidward asks repeatedly with increasing desperation, and the conch denies him every single time. When he demands to know if it can say anything besides no, the conch tells him to try asking again. Squidward asks hopefully. The conch responds with an emphatic, drawn-out, deliberately insulting no. This is divine retribution. Squidward rejected the conch, mocked its followers, and attempted to survive through his own efforts. The conch allowed him to return to the fold, even permitted SpongeBob to welcome him back as a club member, and then systematically denied him any benefit of membership. Patrick asks the conch if he can have a sandwich and receives permission. Squidward asks and gets rejected. The conch distinguishes between the faithful and the apostate, rewarding devotion and punishing doubt. The forest ranger's arrival seals the theory completely. A stranger emerges from the kelp, machete in hand, appearing to offer rescue. Squidward celebrates his salvation. Then the ranger reveals that he also carries a magic conch shell, that his conch specifically told him to come save these people, and that he is a fellow member of the shell-worshipping community. He performs the victory screech. SpongeBob and Patrick perform the victory screech. 3 separate individuals, operating independently, all following instructions from their respective conch shells, have been brought together by coordinated divine guidance. The conch shells communicate with each other, or they're all connected to the same source, or there's a single entity speaking through multiple physical vessels distributed across Bikini Bottom. The Ranger's conch knew that SpongeBob and Patrick were stranded. It knew their location. It sent its follower on a rescue mission through dangerous wilderness to reach them. This coordination requires either supernatural communication between the shells or a single consciousness operating all of them simultaneously. When the Ranger asks his conch what they should do now, it gives the same answer SpongeBob's conch gave at the beginning. Nothing. All 4 characters, including Squidward, who has finally broken under the weight of evidence, sit down together and do nothing. All Hail the Magic Conch becomes a group chant. The episode ends with 4 people in the middle of a dangerous forest, sitting motionless, waiting for their deity to provide the next instruction. The faithful have been rewarded with community. The doubter has been broken into compliance. The magic conch has demonstrated its power, its reach, and its willingness to punish those who question its authority. The toy explanation requires you to believe that a string pull randomizer coordinated an airplane crash, denied food to a specific individual across multiple requests, and guided a stranger through miles of wilderness to a precise location. The deity explanation just requires you to accept that SpongeBob and Patrick accidentally started worshipping something real. Moving forward to the next theory, the utility belt mass evacuation theory. Mermaid Man's utility belt contains a shrink ray. SpongeBob gets his hands on it, accidentally shrinks Squidward, panics, shrinks more people, keeps panicking, and eventually shrinks the entire population of Bikini Bottom before solving the problem by shrinking the city itself to match. The episode plays this as a comedy of errors driven by SpongeBob's inability to operate superhero technology. The theory underneath all the slapstick suggests that the shrink ray was never a weapon at all. Mermaid Man designed it for emergency mass evacuation, and SpongeBob accidentally demonstrated its intended purpose, while having absolutely no idea what he was doing. Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy 4 opens with the French narrator describing the Krusty Krab as a place where all the many kinds of undersea life pass through its doors. Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy enter, order food, and Mermaid Man pays with a metal nut because apparently superhero retirement doesn't come with a pension. The belt falls off when Mermaid Man's pants drop, a running gag about the belt's secondary function of keeping his costume intact, and SpongeBob picks it up with the reverence of someone handling a religious artifact. He describes it as the emblem of submersible justice, and claims it has helped prevent the fall of nations and pants for 65 years. 65 years of service. The belt predates SpongeBob's existence by decades. Mermaid Man wore this thing through countless battles, disasters, and world-threatening events during his prime superhero years. A utility belt designed purely for combat would contain offensive weapons, defensive shields, communication devices, and mobility enhancements. The primary function of Mermaid Man's belt is a size-changing ray that can affect living creatures without harming them. The shrunk characters experience confusion and inconvenience, but no actual physical damage from the shrinking process itself. Squidward gets transformed into various horrifying configurations when SpongeBob hits wrong buttons, but the shrink ray specifically produces clean, safe, reversible miniaturization. The scale of the ray's capability tells the real story. SpongeBob shrinks individual people at first. Squidward, then Patrick, then Sandy, then a cascade of Bikini Bottom citizens who happen to walk by. By the episode's climax, he has miniaturized the entire population of the city, Every single resident fits inside a pickle jar. The shrink ray can process unlimited targets without depleting its charge, losing accuracy, or causing collateral damage. This technology was calibrated for mass application from the beginning. Picture a disaster scenario from Mermaid Man's glory days. A giant monster attacks Bikini Bottom, a toxic chemical spill threatens the population, an underwater volcano prepares to erupt. Conventional evacuation would be chaos. Thousands of panicking citizens trying to flee through limited escape routes while the threat closes in. Mermaid Man's solution: shrink everyone, collect them in a container, transport the entire population to safety in his pocket, and restore them once the danger passes. The shrink ray transforms impossible logistics into a one-step process. Point, click, and suddenly 10,000 people fit in your hand. The belt's other features support this interpretation. Throughout the series, Mermaid Man's equipment includes the invisible boatmobile rapid transport for moving evacuees, communication devices coordinating rescue efforts, and various protective capabilities. These tools form a complete emergency response kit. The shrink ray represents the evacuation component. Reduce the population to portable size, load them into the vehicle, and drive them somewhere safe. Mermaid Man operated as Bikini Bottom's one-man FEMA before FEMA existed. SpongeBob's accidental mass shrinking actually demonstrates the protocol working exactly as designed. He panics, fires indiscriminately, and successfully miniaturizes the entire city without killing anyone. The ray has safeguards. It defaults to shrinking rather than any harmful effect. Even when SpongeBob has no idea what he's doing, the technology protects its targets from the operator's incompetence. Mermaid Man built idiot-proofing into his emergency equipment because emergencies involve chaos, and chaotic situations produce mistakes. The Wumbo solution reveals something important about the belt's interface. Patrick claims the ray was set to M for Mini when it should be set to W for Wumbo. This sounds like Patrick being Patrick, but Mermaid Man later confirms, "Did you set it to Wumbo?" The belt has a simple toggle between shrinking and enlarging, minimized complexity for high-stress situations. A superhero responding to a disaster can't afford to scroll through menus or remember complex button combinations. Flip a switch one way to shrink, flip it the other way to restore. Patrick's stupidity accidentally uncovered the design philosophy. The shrunken citizens remain perfectly healthy throughout their miniaturized state. They can talk, move, think, and express their entirely justified anger at SpongeBob. The shrinking process preserves all biological functions at reduced scale. Oxygen requirements presumably decrease proportionally, meaning a jar full of shrunken people could survive for extended periods without suffocating. Mermaid Man could theoretically keep an evacuated population safe for hours or even days while the disaster resolved itself. The technology accounts for everything. SpongeBob's final solution of shrinking the city to match the people inverts the intended use but proves the ray's flexibility. Mermaid Man's original plan would involve shrinking people, moving them, then restoring them to normal size in a safe location. SpongeBob's plan involves shrinking everything to match the already shrunk population. The ray accommodates both approaches. It can affect living beings, structures, and apparently entire geographical areas without discrimination. Mermaid Man built a tool that could adapt to whatever evacuation scenario presented itself. The belt's disappearance from Mermaid Man's possession raises its own questions. He drops it accidentally when his pants fall down, forgets about it completely, and drives away with Barnacle Boy without noticing. A piece of equipment capable of shrinking entire civilizations gets treated like a misplaced wallet. Either Mermaid Man's mental deterioration has progressed far enough that he's lost track of phenomenally dangerous technology, or the belt has built-in tracking and recall features that would return it to him eventually. SpongeBob's possession of the belt might have been temporary no matter what happened. The existence of this technology implies that Bikini Bottom has faced extinction-level threats before. Mermaid Man built the belt during his active career, meaning he anticipated scenarios where shrinking everyone became necessary. The show treats current-day Bikini Bottom as relatively peaceful, with Plankton's schemes representing the most significant ongoing threat. The belt suggests a past era of much more serious dangers, disasters that required the ability to evacuate an entire city in seconds. Mermaid Man's retirement coincides with a period of relative safety, but the tools he built for worse times remain functional and ready for deployment. SpongeBob just happened to be the one who demonstrated their capability. Time to check out the next theory, the rock bottom ancient civilization theory. SpongeBob and Patrick accidentally take the wrong bus home from Glove World and end up in Rock Bottom, a terrifying underground city at the bottom of a 90-degree cliff face. The episode plays this as a fish-out-of-water comedy, where SpongeBob struggles to communicate with the locals and catch a bus home. The deeper implications of Rock Bottom's existence suggest something far more significant, an ancient civilization that predates Bikini Bottom, built by a species that no longer exists in their original form, now inhabited by their mutated descendants. Rock Bottom establishes the city's otherness from the moment the bus descends. The road drops at a perfect 90-degree angle, an engineering impossibility that somehow functions as regular public transit infrastructure. The bus driver treats this vertical plunge as routine. The alarm sounds, SpongeBob and Patrick get plastered against the back window, and the vehicle arrives at its destination like nothing unusual happened. Someone built a road straight down into the abyss and connected it to the Bikini Bottom transit system. That construction project required technology, planning, and resources that the current residents of Rock Bottom clearly don't possess. The architecture of Rock Bottom screams remnants of something greater. The bus station has the framework of organized society: schedules, lines, service windows, ticket systems. These structures exist, but they operate in ways that seem deliberately hostile to outsiders. The bathroom doors have question marks instead of gender symbols. The schedule board might as well be written in an alien language. The vending machines work on principles SpongeBob can't comprehend. Everything in Rock Bottom was designed by someone, and that someone had completely different assumptions about how civilization should function. The residents themselves provide the strongest evidence for the collapsed civilization theory. Every creature in Rock Bottom speaks with raspberry sounds inserted between their words. This linguistic quirk isn't random rudeness. It's a distinct dialect that developed in isolation over generations. SpongeBob eventually realizes he needs to add raspberries to his own speech to be understood. The next bus. Raspberry to Bikini. Raspberry Bottom. The window attendant immediately comprehends him once he adapts to the local communication style. Rock Bottom has its own language that evolved separately from surface Bikini Bottom, suggesting a population that's been cut off long enough for linguistic drift to occur. The physical appearance of Rock Bottom's inhabitants diverges significantly from Bikini Bottom residents. They have bioluminescent features, elongated bodies, and adaptations for living in complete darkness. These aren't cosmetic differences. These are evolutionary adaptations to an environment that differs fundamentally from the surface world. The creatures of Rock Bottom descend from whatever species originally built this place, transformed by generations of living in conditions that would kill most Bikini Bottom citizens. The soil itself is sentient and asks SpongeBob to put it down. This throwaway gag implies that Rock Bottom's environment operates on completely different biological rules. Soil with consciousness and the ability to communicate suggests either extreme mutation or an entirely different form of life that developed in isolation from the surface ecosystem. The ground itself has evolved alongside the inhabitants. The bus system connecting Rock Bottom to Bikini Bottom represents relatively recent infrastructure. Someone decided to link these two worlds after they had already developed separately. The vertical road wasn't part of Rock Bottom's original design. It was added later, possibly as an attempt to reintegrate a lost population with surface civilization. The bus service runs regularly enough that schedules exist. But the practical challenges of the connection, 90-degree drops, incompatible languages, hostile environments suggest this integration remains incomplete. SpongeBob's repeated failures to catch a bus home highlight how poorly designed the connection is for surface dwellers. Every system in Rock Bottom seems calibrated to frustrate outsiders while functioning perfectly for locals. The buses arrive and depart based on schedules that SpongeBob can't predict. The line at the station produces eggs that hatch into more people ahead of him. The candy machine operates on timing that coincides exactly with bus arrivals. Rock Bottom doesn't want visitors to leave easily. The city, or whatever remains of its original intelligence, seems to prefer keeping outsiders trapped. The advanced darkness SpongeBob encounters after the station closes goes beyond mere absence of light. This darkness has presence, has weight, has the quality of something that exists rather than something that's missing. Rock Bottom sits so far below the surface that normal concepts of illumination don't apply. The original builders of this city either didn't need light or had access to light sources that no longer function. The current inhabitants have adapted to the darkness through bioluminescence, but the infrastructure they inherited wasn't designed with their adaptations in mind. Bert, the creature who eventually helps SpongeBob escape, demonstrates that Rock Bottom's inhabitants aren't inherently hostile. He retrieves SpongeBob's balloon, inflates it enough to float SpongeBob back to the surface, and does this without being asked. The locals have the capacity for kindness. They just don't share SpongeBob's frame of reference for communication or social interaction. Bert's help comes after SpongeBob finally starts speaking the local dialect, suggesting that the barriers between civilizations are linguistic and cultural rather than moral. The episode ends with Patrick taking a bus back to Rock Bottom to rescue SpongeBob, who has already escaped. Patrick will presumably experience the same communication barriers, the same hostile infrastructure, and the same isolation that SpongeBob endured. Rock Bottom continues to exist as an alternate society parallel to Bikini Bottom, connected by buses but separated by evolution, language, and thousands of years of divergent development. The theory positions rock bottom as evidence of Bikini Bottom's prehistory. Before the nuclear testing that created the current talking fish civilization, something else existed in these waters. That civilization built downward, constructed infrastructure that defied physics, and eventually collapsed or transformed into something unrecognizable. The creatures living in rock bottom today are the descendants of whatever survived that collapse, adapted to conditions that would have been unimaginable to their ancestors. Rock bottom represents what Bikini Bottom could become if isolated for long enough, or what it evolved from before the surface world took its current form. Alright, here comes the next theory. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. The SpongeBob debt slavery theory. SpongeBob SquarePants works at the Krusty Krab as a fry cook. He has held this position for years, possibly decades if we're counting in showtime. He displays absolute devotion to his job, arriving early, staying late, and treating every Krabby Patty like a sacred artifact worthy of worship. Mr. Krabs pays him essentially nothing. In some episodes, Mr. Krabs actually charges SpongeBob for the privilege of working. This arrangement makes zero sense unless SpongeBob owes Mr. Krabs something so significant that he's effectively working off an unpayable debt. Squeaky Boots demonstrates exactly how this exploitative dynamic functions. Mr. Krabs buys a pair of boots for $2 to give to Pearl as a birthday present. Pearl rejects them because they're not the trendy flipper slippers all her friends wear. Mr. Krabs, devastated at having wasted $2 whole, needs to recoup his losses. SpongeBob walks in asking for his paycheck. Mr. Krabs sees an opportunity. He invents a story about the boots being official fry cook boots, given to him by the most famous fry cook in the sea, whose name he conveniently can't remember. SpongeBob, desperate to validate his identity as a fry cook, offers to trade his entire paycheck for these worthless boots. Mr. Krabs accepts immediately. SpongeBob then volunteers to paint the Krusty Krab for free. Mr. Krabs accepts. SpongeBob offers a year's supply of free French fry orders. Mr. Krabs accepts. SpongeBob starts to offer more, and Mr. Krabs has to physically stop him because the generosity might give him a heart attack. This scene reveals the fundamental imbalance in their relationship. SpongeBob voluntarily surrenders his paycheck, his labor, and his future productivity for a pair of $2 boots. He doesn't negotiate. He doesn't question the boots' supposed value. He just keeps offering more until Mr. Krabs cuts him off out of concern for his own cardiac health. SpongeBob has been conditioned to give everything he has to Mr. Krabs without expecting fair compensation in return. The paycheck itself represents a recurring manipulation tactic. Mr. Krabs mentions early in the episode that SpongeBob came in asking for his paycheck, implying that paychecks require active requests rather than automatic distribution. SpongeBob has to ask permission to receive money he's already earned. Mr. Krabs controls when and whether SpongeBob gets paid, which gives him leverage to extract additional concessions. The boots become a tool for absorbing SpongeBob's entire paycheck plus extra labor, converting what should be a simple wage transaction into an opportunity for exploitation. The episode's climax shows Mr. Krabs stealing the boots back in the middle of the night because their squeaking drives him insane. He breaks into SpongeBob's home, removes the boots from his sleeping employee's feet, and takes them back to the Krusty Krab. When SpongeBob discovers the boots are missing, he doesn't suspect Mr. Krabs at all. He blames himself. He cries. He apologizes profusely for losing valuable property that was never valuable to begin with. He tells Mr. Krabs, "I let you down," as if SpongeBob owes him something beyond the already surrendered paycheck and free labor. Mr. Krabs' response to SpongeBob's distress involves offering magic oven mitts as a replacement for the boots. He's essentially trying to run the same scam again, repackaging worthless items as special, and using SpongeBob's emotional vulnerability to extract more loyalty. SpongeBob rejects the mitts, but only because they're not the same, not because he recognizes the manipulation. The guilt Mr. Krabs eventually displays comes from the squeaking haunting his conscience, not from any recognition that he exploited his employee. He hallucinates the squeaking everywhere, imagines the boots following him, and eventually confesses to stealing them back. His confession takes the form of a telltale heart parody, suggesting that even Mr. Krabs' subconscious knows he did something wrong. He digs up the boots from under the floorboards, eats them, and tells SpongeBob that the boots never mattered anyway. It's not the boots, it's the booty. I mean, the person in the boots. This would be a touching moment if Mr. Krabs hadn't just scammed SpongeBob out of his paycheck, free labor, and a year of free product for those very boots. Mr. Krabs generously gives SpongeBob his paycheck at the end, the same paycheck SpongeBob was owed from the beginning of the episode. He mentions adding a bonus, then immediately takes the bonus back. SpongeBob receives exactly what he was entitled to before any of this happened, and he thanks Mr. Krabs like he's received a gift. The scam cost SpongeBob his original paycheck, which he traded for the boots, free painting labor, which he volunteered, a year of free French fry service, which he volunteered, and the emotional trauma of thinking he lost something valuable. SpongeBob ends the episode feeling grateful for receiving his standard compensation. This pattern repeats throughout the series. SpongeBob accepts whatever Mr. Krabs offers, volunteers additional labor whenever possible, and treats his job at the Krusty Krab as the greatest privilege of his life. He never asks for raises, he never complains about working conditions, he never questions why he works harder than anyone else and receives less compensation than anyone else. The only explanation that makes sense is that SpongeBob believes he owes Mr. Krabs a debt so large that no amount of labor could ever repay it. The nature of this debt remains unspecified, but fan theories point to SpongeBob's housing situation. The pineapple sits on prime real estate between Squidward's house and Patrick's rock. SpongeBob shows no sign of paying rent or a mortgage. He has no savings, no financial stability, and no apparent concern about money despite working for poverty wages. Either someone else is paying for his home, or he already paid for it through an arrangement that keeps him bound to the Krusty Krab forever. Mr. Krabs, the most financially predatory character in Bikini Bottom, would be the obvious candidate for a deal that trades housing security for lifetime labor exploitation. The theory reframes SpongeBob's cheerful attitude as a coping mechanism rather than genuine happiness. He convinces himself that he loves his job because the alternative is acknowledging that he's trapped in a system designed to extract maximum value from his labor while returning minimum compensation. His enthusiasm for fry cooking, his devotion to Mr. Krabs, his willingness to work for free. These become symptoms of someone who has accepted their situation so completely that they've stopped recognizing it as exploitation. SpongeBob smiles because smiling is the only response he has left. Let's roll into the next theory. The jellyfish energy harvest theory. SpongeBob and Patrick spend a suspicious amount of time catching jellyfish. They treat it as a hobby, a recreational activity that provides joy and fulfillment in their otherwise mundane underwater lives. The show frames jellyfishing as an innocent pastime, equivalent to fishing or butterfly collecting in the surface world. The theory lurking beneath this cheerful presentation suggests that jellyfish serve as Bikini Bottom's primary energy source, and the hobby of jellyfishing functions as unrecognized essential labor that keeps the entire city's power grid operational. Jellyfish Jam demonstrates the electrical potential of jellyfish in ways the show never explicitly acknowledges. SpongeBob brings a wild jellyfish home as a pet, and the creature immediately demonstrates an intense relationship with electronic equipment. The jellyfish gravitates towards SpongeBob's stereo system, turns it on without assistance, and refuses to let it be turned off. When SpongeBob tries to go to bed, the jellyfish keeps activating the music. More jellyfish arrive throughout the night, drawn to the electrical output of the stereo, until SpongeBob's house contains a massive swarm all pulsing in sync with the electronic beats. The jellyfish enhance the music. SpongeBob's house vibrates with energy as the party intensifies. The music plays for 18 hours straight without the stereo showing any sign of power drain. Squidward complains about the noise lasting through the night and into the next day, suggesting that the jellyfish are somehow sustaining or amplifying the electrical output rather than depleting it. The party only ends when the stereo physically breaks, not when it runs out of power. Real jellyfish produce bioluminescent light through chemical reactions. The show's jellyfish glow constantly, produce stinging electricity on contact, and can be milked for jelly that SpongeBob spreads on bread like a condiment. These creatures have been modified or mutated into biological generators that produce usable energy as a byproduct of their existence. The nuclear testing theory for Bikini Bottom's creation would explain how normal jellyfish evolved into the glowing electrical creatures that populate jellyfish fields. The scene where SpongeBob milks a jellyfish like a cow carries implications beyond the surface joke. He extracts jelly from the creature using a technique that suggests established practice, as if this is something he's done many times before. The jellyfish moos during the process, indicating that domestication of these creatures for resource extraction has been normalized to the point where they respond like livestock. SpongeBob treats the jelly as food, but the same extraction process could theoretically harvest the electrical charge that jellyfish carry. Jellyfish Fields sits conveniently close to Bikini Bottom, positioned as an accessible resource extraction site disguised as a nature preserve. SpongeBob and Patrick visit regularly, catching jellyfish and then releasing them. This catch and release pattern mirrors sustainable harvesting practices. Take what you need, return the source to replenish itself, repeat indefinitely. The jellyfish population never seems to decrease despite constant hunting. Either the fields contain an infinite supply, or the hunting serves a different purpose than simple recreation. The electrical infrastructure of Bikini Bottom operates without any visible power plants, solar panels, or energy generation facilities. The city has lights, appliances, television stations, and electronic equipment throughout, all requiring constant electricity. Underwater environments pose unique challenges for power generation. No wind for turbines, no accessible sunlight for solar, no flowing fresh water for hydroelectric. The most abundant electrical resource in Bikini Bottom's ecosystem would be the jellyfish that populate the nearby fields by the thousands. SpongeBob's expertise in jellyfishing takes on new significance through this lens. He's not just good at catching jellyfish for fun, he's highly skilled at resource extraction for an essential industry. His net technique, his knowledge of jellyfish behavior, his ability to navigate jellyfish fields efficiently, these represent valuable labor capabilities that Bikini Bottom's power grid depends on. The fact that he does this work for free, treating it as a hobby rather than employment, means the city benefits from his labor without compensating him. The swarm behavior in Jellyfish Jam shows what happens when jellyfish energy concentrates in one location. SpongeBob's house becomes a focal point for electrical activity, drawing more and more jellyfish as the party intensifies. The creatures seem to feed off electronic equipment while simultaneously powering it, creating a feedback loop that nearly destroys SpongeBob's home. This dangerous potential explains why Bikini Bottom might prefer distributed harvesting through recreational jellyfishing rather than concentrated extraction facilities. Too many jellyfish in one place creates instability. Gary's solution at the episode's end involves using rhythmic sounds to lead the jellyfish back to their fields. The creatures follow a beat, moving in synchronized patterns that respond to acoustic stimulation. This suggests that jellyfish could be herded and controlled through sound-based systems, making large-scale harvesting operations feasible if Bikini Bottom's leadership chose to industrialize the process. The fact that they haven't industrialized implies either that the current hobby-based system works well enough, or that someone benefits from keeping the arrangement informal and unpaid. Squidward's clarinet playing causes the jellyfish to become aggressive. They sting him repeatedly for producing unpleasant sounds. The jellyfish have preferences, opinions about the acoustic input they receive, and the willingness to enforce those preferences through violence. Creatures this responsive to stimuli, this capable of coordinated action, and this electrically charged represent both a valuable resource and a potential threat. Bikini Bottom's approach of encouraging recreational interaction rather than industrial exploitation might be a deliberate strategy to maintain peaceful coexistence with a species that could easily become dangerous if provoked. The wild animals can throw very wild parties moral the French narrator delivers at the episode's end works as a surface-level lesson about respecting nature. The deeper implication is that jellyfish possess power that Bikini Bottom's residents underestimate at their peril. These creatures can take over a home, operate electronic equipment, attract hundreds of their kind to a single location, and resist human attempts to control them. SpongeBob only resolves the situation by giving the jellyfish what they want: music, rhythm, a path back to their natural habitat. He doesn't defeat them, he negotiates with them. The jellyfish hold more power in this relationship than anyone wants to acknowledge. Next theory on the list, the Pearl adoption theory. Mr. Krabs is a crab, Pearl is a whale. The show never explains this biological impossibility, and the characters treat it as completely unremarkable. Pearl calls Mr. Krabs daddy, Mr. Krabs refers to Pearl as his darling daughter, and everyone in Bikini Bottom accepts that a tiny crustacean somehow fathered a massive cetacean. The theory that has circulated through the fanbase for years offers a far darker explanation. Mr. Krabs adopted Pearl after her biological parents were killed, likely by whale hunters, and his obsessive protectiveness stems from survivor's guilt and a promise to keep her safe. One-course meal provides the most disturbing window into how whales are perceived in the SpongeBob universe. Plankton has a deep, primal terror of whales that goes beyond simple phobia. When Pearl enters the Krusty Krab, Plankton screams, "Call off your daughter, Krabs! Call her off!" and backs away in absolute panic. He specifically references documentaries. I've seen those documentaries. The documentaries he's referring to show whales consuming plankton by the billions, filtering entire populations through their baleen plates. To Plankton, whales represent existential genocide. The nightmare sequence takes this further. Plankton dreams of falling into Pearl's mouth, sliding down her throat, and landing in her stomach where he encounters his ancestors. His grandfather greets him with "Glad you could join the rest of the family," before pointing out that Plankton is standing in gastric acid. The implication is unmistakable. Whales have been eating Plankton's family for generations. His fear isn't irrational. It's ancestral trauma encoded into his very being. This establishes that whale-related violence exists in the SpongeBob universe as a known, documented phenomenon. Whales eat smaller creatures. Nature documentaries record this predation. The food chain operates with brutal efficiency. If whales prey on plankton in this world, what preys on whales? The surface world looms above Bikini Bottom throughout the series. Humans appear occasionally, usually in the form of fishermen, beachgoers, or the mysterious live-action segments. Bikini Atoll, the real-world location that gives Bikini Bottom its name, has a long history of human activity including nuclear testing and, historically, whaling operations. Pearl's biological parents could have been victims of surface world hunters who took everything from a whale family except one calf small enough to escape notice or lucky enough to survive. Mr. Krabs' naval background appears in multiple episodes. He served on a ship, acquired nautical knowledge, and developed connections to the surface world that most Bikini Bottom residents lack. A younger Mr. Krabs, perhaps during his sailing days, could have encountered an orphaned whale calf and made the decision that would define the rest of his life. He took responsibility for a creature that had no one else, a creature so different from himself that their relationship defies biological explanation. The money obsession takes on new dimensions through this lens. Mr. Krabs hoards every penny with pathological intensity. He pays SpongeBob in wacky bucks that aren't real currency. He charges employees for breathing, for standing still, for existing on Krusty Krab property. This behavior reads as comedic greed on the surface, but whales are expensive to raise. Pearl's food costs alone would be astronomical. A whale's nutritional needs dwarf anything a crab would naturally consume. Mr. Krabs' obsession with money might stem from years of struggling to afford keeping his adopted daughter alive and healthy. Pearl's birthday episode in One Course Meal shows Mr. Krabs buying her cheap fishing boots instead of the trendy flipper slippers all her friends wear. He spent $2 on her present. Pearl's reaction is dramatic teenage disappointment. But Mr. Krabs' genuine distress at wasting $2 suggests ongoing financial anxiety around providing for her. He wants to give Pearl everything. He can never afford to give Pearl everything. The gap between his love and his resources creates constant tension. The protectiveness Mr. Krabs displays toward Pearl throughout the series exceeds normal parental concern. He monitors her social life obsessively. He threatens anyone who shows romantic interest in her. He panics when she's in any kind of danger. This could be standard overprotective father behavior, or it could be the trauma response of someone who made a promise to protect this child after failing to protect her original family. Every threat to Pearl reminds him of what was lost before he found her. Pearl herself shows no awareness of being adopted in any episode. She calls Mr. Krabs daddy without hesitation, treats their relationship as completely natural, and never questions why she looks nothing like him. Either she was adopted young enough that she has no memory of her biological parents, or Mr. Krabs has kept the truth from her to protect her from the trauma of knowing how she lost her original family. The secret would explain some of the awkwardness in their interactions, the sense that Mr. Krabs is always slightly performing the role of father rather than inhabiting it naturally. Mr. Krabs' willingness to exploit Plankton's whale phobia in this episode reveals a dark practicality. He dresses as Pearl, terrorizes Plankton for 16 days straight, drives him to suicidal ideation, and laughs about it the entire time. He uses whale identity as a weapon because he understands intimately how powerful and terrifying whales are. He's seen what they can do. He knows the fear they inspire. He's also spent years raising one, learning to see past the predator to the person underneath. Pearl isn't scary to him because he watched her grow from a frightened orphan into a normal teenager. The theory reframes the entire Krabs-Pearl relationship as a story about found family forged through tragedy. Mr. Krabs didn't father Pearl. He chose her. He found a baby whale with no one to care for her and decided that he would be her family regardless of how impossible that seemed. Every penny he's earned, every scheme he's run, every employee he's exploited has been in service of keeping that promise. Pearl represents the one thing Mr. Krabs values more than money, the daughter he saved from the same fate that took her parents. Let's break down the next theory, the SpongeBob life creation theory. SpongeBob blows a bubble shaped like a person, names it Bubble Buddy, and spends an entire day treating it as a living friend. The episode frames this as SpongeBob being SpongeBob, a naive optimist who anthropomorphizes everything and doesn't understand that bubbles aren't real companions. The joke is that SpongeBob is so lonely and so desperate for friendship that he'll befriend inanimate objects. Then the episode's final 30 seconds completely obliterate that interpretation when Bubble Buddy grabs Squidward's hand, speaks in complete sentences, hails a taxi, and flies away to live his own independent life. SpongeBob didn't imagine his friend was alive. SpongeBob accidentally created a sentient being through the power of bubble soap and whatever reality warping abilities he apparently possesses. Bubble Buddy opens with the French narrator establishing that every day is a holiday for SpongeBob, even if he has to make one up. SpongeBob celebrates Leif Erikson Day, a holiday that may or may not exist in his culture, and discovers that all his friends are unavailable. Patrick went to get giant paper. Sandy went south for the winter. Squidward left a note that just says no, SpongeBob needs a friend, and none of his existing friends will do. His solution? I'll make one. The creation sequence shows SpongeBob testing different materials. Stick Buddy falls over. Rock Buddy doesn't respond. Sink Buddy produces a water droplet that SpongeBob considers almost sufficient. None of these creations achieve consciousness. Then SpongeBob picks up his bubble wand, dips it in soap, and blows a human-shaped bubble. Bubble Buddy exists. The difference between the failed creations and the successful one appears to be SpongeBob's bubble-blowing expertise combined with the specific intention to create a friend rather than just an object. Throughout the episode, Bubble Buddy exhibits behaviors that everyone, including SpongeBob, attributes to SpongeBob's imagination. Bubble Buddy is thirsty and needs a bendy straw. Bubble Buddy is lactose intolerant and can't eat cheese. Bubble Buddy needs to use the bathroom and takes 2 hours. Each of these demands frustrates the other characters, who assume SpongeBob is making up preferences for an inanimate bubble. SpongeBob interprets Bubble Buddy's needs as if he's receiving communication from his creation, and everyone dismisses this as delusion. The bathroom sequence provides the strongest pre-reveal evidence that Bubble Buddy operates independently. SpongeBob waits outside the Port-O Head while Bubble Buddy occupies it for 2 hours. SpongeBob dances, SpongeBob waits, SpongeBob seems genuinely unaware of what Bubble Buddy is doing inside. If SpongeBob were controlling Bubble Buddy or projecting behaviors onto an inanimate bubble, there would be no reason for the extended bathroom break. SpongeBob would simply decide Bubble Buddy was finished and move on. Instead, SpongeBob waits because Bubble Buddy isn't ready, suggesting autonomous decision-making happening inside that bathroom stall. The town's rage against Bubble Buddy accumulates throughout the episode. He owes Mr. Krabs money, paid in bubble currency that popped. He made Squidward provide excellent service. He washed Pearl's treasured dirty flipper. He kept people waiting in line. He called Larry and others fat. Most significantly, he made Scooter experience high tide, which apparently resulted in Scooter's death since his ghost floats up from the sand where SpongeBob and Bubble Buddy buried him. Bubble Buddy has a body count before the episode ends, and SpongeBob seems completely unaware of this consequence. The mob scene tests how far SpongeBob will go to protect his creation. He shields Bubble Buddy with his body. He tries to blow them both to safety. He makes an emotional speech about the value of friendship and asks the crowd if they've ever had a special friend. The crowd members confess their own object attachments: Nickel Buddy, Funny Muffler, Jerky Pal, Boo Boo Keys, Snake Eyes. These confessions momentarily soften the mob before they decide to pop Bubble Buddy anyway. SpongeBob's appeal almost works because the underlying truth resonates. Sometimes objects become more than objects. Squidward charges with a needle. The needle approaches Bubble Buddy's surface. SpongeBob screams. Then Bubble Buddy's hand catches Squidward's wrist, stops the attack, and Bubble Buddy speaks his first words. Whoa, hey, don't I get a say in this? The entire episode recontextualizes in that moment. Bubble Buddy wasn't performing for SpongeBob's benefit. Bubble Buddy was living. He had preferences, because he actually has preferences. He took 2 hours in the bathroom because he actually needed 2 hours. He communicated his dietary restrictions because he actually has them. SpongeBob wasn't anthropomorphizing an object. SpongeBob was accurately interpreting signals from a conscious being that nobody else recognized as conscious. Bubble Buddy's departure speech confirms his autonomous existence. I'll see you later, SpongeBob. Things are getting a little weird around here. He hails a bubble taxi, climbs inside, and floats away into the sky while wishing SpongeBob a happy Leif Erikson day. He remembers the holiday SpongeBob was celebrating at the episode's beginning. He has continuity of experience. He has opinions about his environment. Things are weird. He has the ability to leave when he chooses, and the social intelligence to know when leaving is appropriate. SpongeBob's reaction to Bubble Buddy's departure is emotional but not surprised. Of course, he says when Squidward expresses shock that Bubble Buddy is alive. Otherwise, he couldn't tell such funny jokes. SpongeBob always knew Bubble Buddy was real. He wasn't delusional. Everyone else was failing to perceive reality correctly. The implications of SpongeBob's creation power extend far beyond this single episode. If SpongeBob can blow a bubble that becomes a sentient being with its own personality, preferences, and autonomous will, what else has he created? How many of his imaginary friends throughout the series were actually real? What happens to the bubble creations that don't achieve visibility to other characters? SpongeBob blows bubbles constantly. He's demonstrated the ability to create complex bubble sculptures, bubble animals, and bubble architecture. Any of these could theoretically achieve consciousness under the right conditions. The episode ends with Squidward noticing a remaining bubble floating nearby. He nervously says, hi, and the episode cuts to black. The question hangs in the air. Is that bubble alive too? Did SpongeBob create multiple conscious beings in a single day? Does every bubble SpongeBob blows have the potential for sentience, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself? SpongeBob possesses the power to create life, and he exercises this power casually, without training, without understanding its implications, and without any apparent limits. Bubble Buddy exists because SpongeBob wanted a friend. If SpongeBob ever wanted something more dangerous, the same creative power could manifest it into reality. The cheerful yellow sponge who lives in a pineapple under the sea might be the most powerful entity in Bikini Bottom, and he has absolutely no idea. Heading into the next theory. The Squidward Fallen Artist Theory. Squidward Tentacles lives between SpongeBob and Patrick on Conch Street, works as a cashier at a fast food restaurant, and spends his free time playing clarinet badly and creating art that nobody appreciates. The show presents him as a delusional mediocrity, someone who believes himself talented while demonstrating consistent incompetence. His paintings are ugly. His music is painful. His attempts at sophistication fall flat in the face of Bikini Bottom's working-class indifference. The theory lurking beneath this comedic surface suggests that Squidward wasn't always like this. Something destroyed his artistic career before the series began, and the bitter cashier we know is what remains of someone who once had genuine talent and success. Squidward the Unfriendly Ghost opens with Squidward admiring a wax sculpture he created of himself. This sculpture demonstrates actual craftsmanship. The proportions are accurate. The detail is impressive. Squidward adjusts the eye placement with the precision of someone who understands sculptural technique. He declares that by creating this piece, he has conquered all artistic media, implying that he's achieved mastery across multiple disciplines: painting, sculpture, music, and presumably others. This isn't the language of a delusional amateur. This is the self-assessment of someone who has genuinely worked through different artistic forms and developed competence in each. The sculpture itself becomes central to the episode's plot when SpongeBob and Patrick accidentally destroy it. Squidward's reaction when he discovers the melted wax goes beyond simple frustration at property damage. His scream contains genuine horror. "Look what you've done to me," he shouts, conflating himself with his creation. The sculpture represented something essential about Squidward's identity, something he considered an immortalized version of himself. Its destruction triggers a response that reads as disproportionate unless the sculpture held deeper significance than surface appearances suggest. Squidward's home contains extensive evidence of a serious artistic practice. He owns multiple self-portraits in different styles. He has a dedicated space for creative work. He possesses the materials and tools of professional artistry. The sheer volume of self-focused artwork suggests either narcissism, the show's surface reading, or an extended period of artistic exploration, using himself as the most readily available subject. Professional artists frequently use self-portraiture to develop technique because the subject is always available and requires no payment. The expensive tastes Squidward displays throughout the series exceed what a Krusty Krab cashier salary could support. He appreciates fine art, classical music, and sophisticated culture. He owns a clarinet, which represents a significant investment. His home contains furniture and decorations that suggest middle-class or higher aesthetic sensibilities. Either Squidward has always lived beyond his means, or he accumulated these possessions during a more prosperous period of his life and now clings to them as reminders of what he once had. His job at the Krusty Krab represents the kind of employment that artists take when their primary career fails to provide stable income. Fast food work offers flexible hours, minimal creative investment, and steady, if small, paychecks. Many struggling artists work service jobs while pursuing their passion on the side. Squidward treats his cashier position with open contempt because it represents the gap between his aspirations and his reality. He's not lazy or ungrateful. He's someone who expected a different life and ended up here instead. The relationship between Squidward and SpongeBob takes on new dimensions through this lens. SpongeBob represents everything Squidward has lost: joy in simple work, enthusiasm for life, the ability to find meaning in everyday activities. SpongeBob's genuine talent at fry cooking torments Squidward because SpongeBob succeeds at something he cares about, while Squidward fails at everything he values. The resentment isn't about SpongeBob personally. It's about what SpongeBob's happiness highlights in Squidward's own misery. The clarinet performances tell their own story. Squidward practices constantly. He clearly knows music theory based on references throughout the series. His technique appears correct even when the sound is terrible. This suggests either that Squidward was never actually good at clarinet, or that something happened to his ability. The former explanation satisfies the show's comedic needs. The latter fits the fallen artist theory. Squidward once played beautifully, some event damaged his confidence or his technique, and now he can only produce painful noise despite retaining the mechanical knowledge of how to play. His physical reactions to criticism reveal deep wounds around his artistic identity. When anyone mocks his painting or his music, Squidward doesn't shrug it off as a hobby enthusiast might. He reacts with defensive anger, dejection, or elaborate justifications. These responses indicate that his artistic identity is core to his self-concept, that attacks on his art feel like attacks on his fundamental worth as a person. Someone who merely dabbles wouldn't internalize criticism so deeply. The episode's climax has SpongeBob and Patrick attempting to send Squidward to the great beyond by trapping him in a bubble and floating him to the surface. Squidward ends up suspended above the ocean, surrounded by seagulls, trapped in a bubble that distorts his attempts to communicate. Patrick says he's in a better place now. The irony is that Squidward is literally trapped between worlds, visible but unable to interact, present but isolated. This physical situation mirrors his psychological state. An artist suspended between the creative world he aspires to and the mundane world he's forced to inhabit. Whatever destroyed Squidward's career remains unspecified, but the show offers hints. He lives alone, suggesting relationships that didn't survive his decline. He chose to settle in Bikini Bottom rather than an artistic community, suggesting exile or escape. He never mentions galleries, patrons, or professional connections that a working artist would maintain. He's cut off from the creative ecosystem that supports artistic careers. Someone or something severed those connections, and Squidward has spent the years since trying to convince himself that he can still create meaningful art in complete isolation. The wax sculpture's destruction might have been devastating, specifically because it represented Squidward's attempt to prove he still had talent. He created something genuinely good, something that demonstrated the skill he feared he'd lost, and then watched it melt into unrecognizable goo because of forces beyond his control. The sculpture's fate mirrors what happened to his career, something he built carefully, something that represented his best self, destroyed by circumstances he couldn't prevent. SpongeBob and Patrick become stand-ins for whatever forces originally wrecked his artistic life, and his exploitation of them throughout the episode reads as displaced revenge against the universe that took everything from him. Let's slide into the next theory. The hash-slinging slasher reality theory. Squidward invents a scary story to frighten SpongeBob during the night shift. The hash-slinging slasher, he claims, was a clumsy fry cook who cut off his own hand, replaced it with a rusty spatula, got hit by a bus, and was fired at his own funeral. Now his ghost returns every Tuesday night to wreak horrible vengeance. Squidward immediately admits he made the whole thing up. The story is fake. The monster isn't real. SpongeBob can stop screaming. Then every single element of the story comes true. Graveyard Shift structures itself as a fake-out horror episode. Squidward invents specific supernatural warning signs. The lights will flicker on and off, the phone will ring with nobody there, and the hash-slinging slasher will arrive on the ghost of the bus that killed him. These details feel absurdly specific because Squidward is making them up on the spot, pulling horror movie cliches out of thin air to torment his coworker. The joke is supposed to be that nothing will happen because none of it is real. The lights flicker on and off. Squidward initially assumes SpongeBob is pranking him back, but SpongeBob is on the ceiling, cleaning with suction cups. Neither of them is touching the light switch. Squidward rationalizes. It must be the stupid faulty wiring in here. This place isn't built to run 24 hours a day. This explanation satisfies him momentarily, though it requires believing that the Krusty Krab's electrical system chose this exact moment to malfunction in the exact way Squidward's made-up story predicted. The phone rings with nobody there. Squidward answers, says hello repeatedly, and receives only silence. SpongeBob assumes Squidward is continuing the prank. Squidward insists he's not doing this. The second sign of the hash-slinging slasher's approach has manifested exactly as the invented legend described. Two coincidences now stack on top of each other. A bus arrives at 3 in the morning. Buses don't run this late. SpongeBob notes this casually. Squidward confirms it with growing terror. The bus drops off a shadowy figure across the street, someone holding what appears to be a spatula. The figure crosses toward the Krusty Krab. Squidward's fictional story included the detail that the slasher crosses the street without looking both ways because he's already dead. The figure approaches without checking for traffic, the tapping on the window with the spatula hand, the door opening, the slow approach to the counter. Every beat of Squidward's improvised horror story plays out in sequence. SpongeBob and Squidward huddle together in genuine terror, convinced they're about to die. Squidward confesses that he's always sort of liked SpongeBob. SpongeBob confesses that he used Squidward's clarinet to unclog his toilet. These are deathbed admissions from characters who believe their lives are ending. The rational explanation arrives when the figure steps into the light. He's a nervous green fish named Richard who wanted to apply for a job. He brought his own spatula, explaining the silhouette. He called earlier but hung up because he was nervous, explaining the phone call with nobody there. The bus was just a late-night route. The monster wasn't real. Everyone laughs with relief. Except the lights. Richard explicitly says he was the one on the phone and on the bus. He does not and cannot explain the lights. SpongeBob, Squidward, and Richard all turn to look at the light switch, and the camera reveals Nosferatu, the actual vampire from the 1922 silent film, standing at a comically oversized electrical switch, flickering the lights with malicious glee. The three characters say Nosferatu in unison with a playfully scolding tone, as if they're catching a mischievous friend in the act. Nosferatu smiles. The lights go out. The episode ends. The show presents this as a comedic punchline, a random absurdist gag that deflates the horror tension. Nosferatu exists in this world. He was at the Krusty Krab during the night shift. He was deliberately flickering the lights to match the timing of Squidward's invented story. The rational explanation that resolves the episode actually confirms that something supernatural was happening the entire time. The theory takes this revelation and runs backward through the episode's logic. Nosferatu is a vampire. Vampires in most mythologies have powers that extend beyond light manipulation. If Nosferatu exists in the SpongeBob universe and was present at the Krusty Krab that night, his involvement might extend further than just the lights. He could have influenced the phone call. He could have summoned or redirected the bus. He could have drawn Richard to the restaurant at that specific moment. Nosferatu might have orchestrated the entire evening to match Squidward's story for his own entertainment. The alternative interpretation is even darker. Squidward didn't invent the hash-slinging slasher story. He channeled it. Something about that night, something about the circumstances of the 24-hour shift, opened Squidward to receive information about a legend that was already true. The hash-slinging slasher existed. The story had been circulating through Bikini Bottom's collective unconscious. Squidward accessed it without realizing he was describing real events rather than creating fiction. Richard's convenient explanations might themselves be suspicious. He claims he called and hung up nervously, but how would calling a restaurant and hanging up help with job application anxiety? He claims he took the bus, but admits that buses don't normally run at 3 a.m. His spatula, which he brought himself, creates the exact silhouette that Squidward's story predicted. Richard might be exactly what he claims to be. He might also be the hash-slinging slasher in a form designed to avoid detection. The episode's comedic framing lets it have things both ways. Richard provides explanations. Nosferatu provides the unexplained. The audience is meant to laugh and move on. The theory suggests that the laughter is a defense mechanism against recognizing what actually happened. Squidward accurately predicted a supernatural sequence of events. Something genuinely paranormal caused at least one of the warning signs. And the hash-slinging slasher legend might be based on actual history that the Krusty Krab has carefully suppressed. The final shot of Nosferatu smiling in the darkness carries implications the show never explores. A vampire has taken an interest in the Krusty Krab. He enjoys frightening its employees. He was watching the entire night, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal himself. He'll presumably be back. The Krusty Krab's 24-hour shift policy opened the restaurant to forces that daylight had previously kept at bay. Mr. Krabs' greed for late-night profits invited something into his establishment that won't be easily dismissed. Alright, next theory time. And if you're enjoying the video so far, subscribe to our channel for more videos like these. The Mrs. Puff Identity Change Theory. Mrs. Puff teaches boating school in Bikini Bottom. She's been SpongeBob's instructor for what appears to be years, possibly decades, failing him repeatedly while maintaining her professional composure through increasingly absurd driving disasters. The show presents her as a long-suffering educator trapped in an endless cycle of crashes, explosions, and paperwork. The theory circulating through the fanbase suggests something far darker. Mrs. Puff isn't her real name, this isn't her first boating school, and she's hiding from something in her past that forced her to create a new identity. No Free Rides contains a single line that rewrites everything we think we know about this character. After Mrs. Puff realizes she illegally passed SpongeBob and he now owns a boat capable of causing mass destruction. She spirals into panic. Her internal monologue plays out. Everyone will know that I let him slide through school. I'll have to move to a new city, start a new boating school with a new name. No, not again. Not again. Mrs. Puff has done this before. She has moved to a new city, she has started a new boating school, she has assumed a new name. This wasn't a hypothetical she was considering for the first time. This was a familiar escape pattern she recognized immediately because she's executed it before. The not again carries the weight of someone who has already run from something, already rebuilt her life from scratch, and dreads having to do it once more. The episode never explains what she was running from originally. The surface reading suggests she's fled previous boating school failures, perhaps other students as catastrophically untrainable as SpongeBob. The darker reading suggests the original flight had nothing to do with boating school at all. Mrs. Puff arrived in Bikini Bottom already in hiding, already operating under an assumed identity, and established her teaching career as cover for a person who needed to disappear. Her title raises questions that the show never addresses. She's Mrs. Puff, implying a marriage, but no Mr. Puff appears in any episode. Other characters mention him occasionally, suggesting he existed at some point, but his current status remains ambiguous. The theory proposes that Mr. Puff's fate connects to whatever Mrs. Puff is running from. He might be dead. He might have been the target of whatever pursued her. He might have been complicit in whatever she did, taking the fall while she escaped. The wedding ring she doesn't wear might be buried in the same past she's trying to forget. Mrs. Puff's anxiety response to danger goes beyond normal teacher stress. When SpongeBob crashes, she inflates involuntarily, a defense mechanism that suggests her body has been conditioned to expect physical threats. Her inflation serves as comedic punctuation throughout the series, but physiological responses this dramatic typically develop through repeated trauma. Someone taught Mrs. Puff's body to protect itself through expansion and defensive posturing. That teaching happened before SpongeBob ever sat behind a wheel. The car chase sequence in No Free Rides reveals combat capabilities that no ordinary driving instructor should possess. Mrs. Puff steals SpongeBob's boat with professional efficiency, navigating the ignition process with practiced ease. When SpongeBob catches up and tries to stop her, she fights back with surprising aggression, kicking him out of the vehicle and engaging in physical combat. The final brawl as they plummet off a cliff looks less like a teacher defending herself and more like someone with actual combat training neutralizing a threat. Mrs. Puff knows how to fight. She knows how to steal vehicles. These aren't skills acquired through educator certification programs. Her willingness to commit crimes to solve the SpongeBob problem demonstrates a moral flexibility inconsistent with her public persona. Mrs. Puff steals the boat under cover of darkness, wearing a ski mask, using skills she apparently practiced before. I hope I still remember how to do this. The balloon giraffe she creates while preparing for the theft suggests either nervous energy or a habitual ritual she performs before operations. Either way, she's done this kind of thing before. Stealing vehicles at night while disguised isn't amateur behavior. The police involvement at the episode's end results in Mrs. Puff going to jail, which she accepts with resignation rather than panic. Someone truly hiding from their past would fear police databases, fingerprinting, and the exposure that incarceration brings. Mrs. Puff either has fake identification solid enough to survive scrutiny, or she's calculated that a short jail stint is preferable to whatever would happen if she ran again. The alternative, starting over in another city with another name, frightens her more than prison. What could possibly be worse than jail that makes staying put the better option? The not again also implies that her current identity in Bikini Bottom represents at least her second life, possibly her third or fourth. Each iteration of Mrs. Puff would have required building a new teaching career from scratch, establishing credentials, earning community trust, and maintaining the performance of normalcy while knowing that her past could catch up at any moment. The exhaustion she displays is about the cumulative weight of living as someone else for years, maybe decades, without ever being able to relax her guard completely. The theory connects to other episodes where Mrs. Puff's past surfaces in suspicious ways. She's mentioned having a husband who was used as a lamp in some retellings, a fate so bizarre and specific that it sounds like either a trauma response or a practiced cover story designed to shut down questions. She exhibits signs of PTSD that the show plays for laughs, but which paint a darker picture when assembled together. She has nightmares about SpongeBob driving, but those nightmares might be layered over older nightmares about whatever she originally fled. Mrs. Puff teaches boating school because it's the most portable career she could establish. Driving instruction requires minimal, permanent infrastructure, can be shut down quickly, and provides a reason to always have access to vehicles for rapid escape. Her profession isn't random, it's strategic. She chose a job that would let her run again if necessary, and the fact that she's still in Bikini Bottom despite SpongeBob's destruction suggests that whatever she's hiding from hasn't found her yet. She's enduring the torture of teaching him because the alternative, abandoning her current identity, would put her back on the run from something she fears more than any car crash SpongeBob could cause. Let's get into the next theory. The Patrick regeneration theory. Patrick Star survives things that should kill him. He gets crushed by rocks, dried out by sun exposure, torn apart by machinery, and subjected to violence that would destroy any normal sea creature. The show plays this as cartoon invincibility, the same rubber band physics that lets characters fall from great heights and walk away unharmed. The theory lurking beneath the surface draws on actual starfish biology to explain Patrick's impossible durability. He regenerates. Every time Patrick dies, his body reconstructs itself from whatever remains, and the process costs him memories, personality, coherence, and cognitive function. I Had an Accident demonstrates Patrick's relationship with physical destruction in its opening minutes. Patrick plays a video game where his avatar crashes into a mountain and the word dead flashes on screen. Seconds later, real Patrick hits a rock and bashes his body in pieces on Sand Mountain, just like on his video game. His body shatters. He's shown in pieces. The scene transitions and Patrick appears whole again, eating yellow sand off a plate as if nothing happened. The episode doesn't explain how Patrick reassembled. It doesn't need to. Patrick always reassembles. Real starfish possess remarkable regenerative capabilities. A starfish can lose an arm and grow it back. Some species can regenerate their entire body from a single severed limb. The central disc contains enough biological information to reconstruct the whole organism given sufficient time and resources. This regeneration comes with costs in the natural world. It requires energy, takes time, and the regrown portions don't always function identically to the originals. Patrick's cartoon regeneration operates on the same principles, accelerated to comedic speed but following similar biological logic. Patrick's intelligence fluctuates wildly between episodes and sometimes within the same episode. He'll demonstrate surprising insight in one scene and forget basic information in the next. Fans have attributed this to lazy writing, character inconsistency, or deliberate comedic randomness. The regeneration theory offers a biological explanation. Each time Patrick's body reconstructs itself, the neural tissue doesn't reform perfectly. Memories get lost. Cognitive pathways that existed before the trauma fail to reconnect. Patrick's stupidity is actually brain damage accumulated across hundreds of deaths and regenerations. The episode shows SpongeBob's butt getting destroyed in a sandboarding accident. The doctor explains it took 20 hours to reassemble, they ran out of staples and had to use glue, and SpongeBob is lucky luck boy to have survived. SpongeBob's injury required medical intervention, specialized equipment, and professional care. Patrick's identical injury, shattering against a mountain, required nothing. Patrick just reformed on his own, off-screen, without comment. The contrast highlights how differently their bodies handle catastrophic damage. Patrick's memory problems extend beyond general intelligence into specific recall failures. He frequently forgets conversations that happened moments ago. He loses track of what he's doing mid-activity. He can't remember basic facts about his life, his friends, or his own preferences. These symptoms align with what you'd expect from someone whose brain has been destroyed and regrown multiple times. Each regeneration cycle preserves enough information to maintain basic personality and relationships, but loses the fine details that make someone feel continuous with their past self. The I had an accident gorilla sequence puts Patrick through another round of extreme physical trauma. The gorilla stuffs Patrick and Sandy into a bag and beats them repeatedly, using chairs, bouncing them like a ball, and subjecting them to extended violence. Patrick emerges from this assault apparently unharmed, ready to question why there's a gorilla underwater. His body absorbed damage that should have been fatal and processed it without lasting visible effect. The episode ends before we see whether Patrick suffered any memory loss from this particular incident. The theory explains why Patrick sometimes seems smarter in earlier seasons than later ones. Early Patrick displays occasional cleverness, problem-solving ability, and emotional intelligence that later Patrick lacks entirely. If each episode represents potential regeneration events, given how often Patrick experiences physical trauma, the cumulative damage would produce exactly this pattern. Gradual cognitive decline as more and more neural tissue fails to regenerate correctly. Patrick isn't getting stupider because the writers ran out of ideas. Patrick is getting stupider because his brain keeps dying and coming back wrong. Patrick's emotional volatility fits this framework as well. He swings between happiness and rage, affection and cruelty, with little apparent cause. Emotional regulation requires intact neural pathways and consistent brain chemistry. Someone whose neurological architecture keeps getting scrambled would display exactly the kind of unpredictable mood shifts Patrick exhibits. His famous, "Is mayonnaise an instrument?" question isn't random stupidity. It's a brain desperately trying to make connections with damaged hardware. The regeneration theory also explains Patrick's apparent lack of concern about his own safety. He doesn't fear death because death isn't permanent for him. He's experienced it, processed it, and woken up afterward enough times that mortality holds no terror. SpongeBob's terror about going outside makes perfect sense for someone who could permanently die from an accident. Patrick's casual attitude toward danger makes perfect sense for someone who knows he'll reform no matter what happens. SpongeBob explicitly demonstrates regeneration in this episode when he regrows his arms multiple times after pulling them off. "You mean like this, or like this, or this?" Squidward's response, "Except he wasn't a sponge," establishes that regeneration is a species-specific trait. SpongeBob and Patrick both belong to species with regenerative capabilities. The show acknowledges this for SpongeBob directly, but leaves Patrick's version implicit. The ending of the episode features the gorilla ripping SpongeBob in half. producing two talking SpongeBob halves that continue the conversation separately. SpongeBob's consciousness survives bisection because sponge biology allows for this kind of division. Patrick, as a starfish, would have similar capabilities. The episode demonstrates that the characters in this universe can survive division and maintain awareness through processes that would kill normal organisms. Patrick's entire existence might be a continuous series of deaths and rebirths that he's stopped noticing because it happens so frequently. Patrick Star isn't stupid. Patrick Star is brain damaged, repeatedly, by a regeneration process that saves his life at the cost of his cognitive function. Every time he dies and reforms, he loses a little more of whoever he used to be. The Patrick we see in any given episode is the latest version, rebuilt from whatever remained after the previous trauma, carrying fragments of memories and personality traits that don't quite fit together anymore. His cheerful obliviousness isn't a character flaw. It's a survival mechanism for someone who has died more times than he can remember, which, given the memory loss, might be a very low number indeed. Moving right into the next theory, the Krusty Krab lobster trap theory. The Krusty Krab is shaped like a lobster trap. This architectural detail sits in plain sight throughout every episode, so normalized by repetition that viewers stop noticing it. The building has the distinctive barrel shape, the conical entrance structure, and the slatted sides of a traditional lobster trap scaled up to commercial building size. The show never explains why a restaurant would be built in this shape. The theory circulating through the fanbase offers a disturbing answer. The Krusty Krab was literally a lobster trap before Mr. Krabs converted it into a restaurant, and its original purpose involved capturing something far more dangerous than ordinary crustaceans. Krusty Krab training video provides the most detailed origin story for the restaurant available in canon. The narrator explains that after the war, Krabs stayed secluded in a deep depression that seemed endless. But then his luck changed when he acquired a bankrupt retirement home, and with a few minor alterations, the Krusty Krab was born. The scene shows Mr. Krabs painting a giant K over the Rusty Krab sign, with elderly fish playing shuffleboard outside. The official story claims Mr. Krabs converted a retirement home. The building's shape contradicts this explanation entirely. Retirement homes accommodate elderly residents who need accessible spaces, comfortable rooms, and practical layouts. Lobster traps are designed to lure creatures inside through a narrow entrance and prevent them from escaping. The Krusty Krab's architecture matches the trap, not the retirement home. Either Mr. Krabs converted a retirement home that was already shaped like a lobster trap, raising the question of why anyone would build such a facility, or the retirement home story is a cover for the building's actual history. The name Rusty Krab on the original sign suggests the structure existed before Mr. Krabs acquired it. Rust implies metal construction exposed to seawater over time. Lobster traps are traditionally made of metal wire or wooden slats designed to withstand ocean conditions. A giant metal trap sitting on the ocean floor would absolutely develop rust over years of disuse. Mr. Krabs didn't build the Krusty Krab. He found it, recognized its potential, and repurposed it. The question becomes, what was the trap originally designed to catch? Standard lobster traps capture lobsters and crabs, creatures small enough to fit through the entrance funnel. The Krusty Krab's entrance accommodates full-sized fish walking upright. Whatever this trap was built for, it was meant to capture creatures approximately human-sized or larger. The scale suggests either giant crustaceans that no longer exist in Bikini Bottom, or something else entirely that required containment. Mr. Krabs is a crab. He bought a building shaped like a device designed to trap crabs and lobsters. This choice seems counterintuitive, unless Mr. Krabs has specific knowledge about what the trap was for and why it's no longer dangerous. He might have purchased the structure specifically because he understood its history and wanted to control that narrative. A trap converted into a restaurant becomes normalized, its original purpose forgotten. Mr. Krabs literally sits inside a giant version of a device meant to capture his own species, serving food to the public, as if nothing about this situation is strange. The retirement home cover story takes on sinister implications when examined closely. Retirement homes house elderly individuals who are approaching the end of their lives, people who enter and don't leave. A lobster trap operates on the same principle. Creatures enter easily but cannot exit. If the building functioned as a retirement home while retaining its trap architecture, the facility might have been designed to contain elderly residents rather than care for them. Mr. Krabs acquired a structure with a history of keeping living beings inside against their will. The interior layout supports the trap interpretation. The Krusty Krab has a single main entrance that all customers pass through. The kitchen is positioned in the back, separated from the dining area. Emergency exits are never shown or referenced. The building funnels visitors inward through a narrow point and provides limited options for departure. These design elements make perfect sense for a trap and terrible sense for a commercial restaurant that should prioritize customer flow and fire safety. Mr. Krabs' military background after the war connects to potential explanations for the trap's original purpose. Military operations might have required containment facilities for captured enemies, dangerous specimens, or experimental subjects. A trap large enough to hold humanoid creatures would serve military purposes that civilian retirement homes wouldn't require. Mr. Krabs' deep depression after the war might have been guilt over what the trap was used for, and his conversion of the building into a restaurant might represent an attempt to transform something used for harm into something that serves the community. The training video's narrator describes the Krabby Patty as the lost gold of Atlantis and emphasizes protecting it from thieves. This framing positions the restaurant as a vault protecting treasure. The trap architecture suddenly makes more sense. The Krusty Krab wasn't designed to keep customers in, it was designed to keep something else out. The building might have originally protected whatever was stored inside from external threats. Mr. Krabs converted a defensive structure into a business, using its inherent security features to protect his secret formula. Plankton's inability to successfully steal the formula despite hundreds of attempts might be partially explained by the building's trap architecture. The Krusty Krab was designed by someone who understood how to prevent unauthorized entry and exit. The same features that made it effective as a trap make it effective as a secure facility. Plankton keeps failing because he's trying to breach a structure specifically engineered to contain and control access. The theory suggests that somewhere in Bikini Bottom's history, something existed that required a trap this large to contain. That something might be extinct now, driven away, or still present in some form that residents have learned to ignore. Mr. Krabs knows what the trap was for. His decision to live and work inside it every day might be the act of a man keeping watch over something, maintaining a vigil that the rest of Bikini Bottom has forgotten is necessary. The Krusty Krab serves Krabby Patties on the surface. Underneath that cheerful facade, it remains what it always was, a trap, waiting for something to trigger its original purpose. Let's dive into the next theory. The Sandy Exile Theory. Sandy Cheeks lives at the bottom of the ocean in a sealed dome that requires specialized equipment to maintain breathable air. She's a land mammal surrounded by water, isolated from her own species, separated from her home state by an environment that would kill her instantly if her protective systems failed. The show presents this as a research assignment, a scientific posting that Sandy chose to pursue. The theory that has circulated through the fanbase suggests something darker. Sandy didn't choose Bikini Bottom. Texas sent her there as punishment, and her research mission is actually a form of exile that she's serving whether she wants to or not. Texas reveals the depth of Sandy's homesickness in ways that go beyond normal career relocation adjustments. She builds a sand sculpture of Texas and calls it nothing but a memory now. She refuses to participate in activities she normally enjoys. She composes an entire song about wanting to go home, a song so emotionally devastating that it makes Mr. Krabs cry, causes customers at the Krusty Krab to beg for it to stop, and reduces SpongeBob and Patrick to sobbing wrecks. This isn't someone who misses their hometown after voluntarily moving away for work. This is someone experiencing the grief of forced separation. The song's lyrics paint a picture of complete displacement. Sandy describes Texas as the prettiest place in the world and declares she'll always be a Texas girl. She misses 20 acres, barbecues, and pecan pies. She states directly, "I want to go home." These aren't the sentiments of someone on a temporary research posting who can return whenever she wants. These are the words of someone who believes she cannot go back, someone mourning a life she's been permanently removed from. Sandy's living situation in Bikini Bottom requires extraordinary resources to maintain. Her tree dome contains an entire ecosystem, a tree, grass, flowers, and breathable air. The technology needed to sustain this environment underwater would cost more than any individual researcher could afford. Someone is funding Sandy's dome, paying for the equipment, the air supply, and the ongoing maintenance. If Sandy were a voluntary researcher, she would work for an organization that provided these resources. If she were in exile, the same resources would be provided as part of her sentence, ensuring she survives her punishment without being able to escape it. The protective dome itself functions as a prison. Sandy can leave her dome, but only while wearing a suit that constantly reminds her she doesn't belong in this environment. Every breath she takes outside her home comes from a tank with limited capacity. She can never fully integrate into Bikini Bottom society because her biological needs prevent casual participation in underwater life. The dome keeps her alive while simultaneously confining her to a single location. She's not being tortured, but she's definitely being contained. Sandy's aggressive reaction to insults about Texas reveals how central her identity remains despite her displacement. When SpongeBob and Patrick mock Texas to get her attention, she transforms from a homesick scientist into something much more dangerous. She crashes through solid rock. She creates what appears to be a nuclear explosion when catching Patrick. She karate chops SpongeBob in half. She threatens to be on you like Ugly on an ape. This level of defensive rage suggests that Texas is the core of who she is, and her separation from it constitutes an attack on her fundamental sense of self. The show never explains why Sandy, specifically, was chosen for underwater research. Texas has no obvious connection to marine science. Sandy's skills involve karate, rodeo, and general scientific tinkering, none of which require an underwater laboratory. If Texas wanted to study ocean life, they could send actual marine biologists. Instead, they sent a squirrel with no particular aquatic expertise to live alone at the bottom of the sea. This makes sense as punishment. Remove the problematic individual to an environment where they can't cause trouble, frame it as an honor to save face, and provide enough support to keep them alive indefinitely. The bosses, Sandy occasionally mentions, remain faceless and unnamed throughout the series. She references having to report to someone, having obligations to fulfill, and needing to justify her continued presence in Bikini Bottom. These references suggest oversight without providing any details about who's watching or what they want. Legitimate research positions come with named supervisors, institutional affiliations, and clear reporting structures. Sandy's arrangement has the vagueness of something designed to be unexaminable, a cover story that holds up only as long as no one asks too many questions. Sandy's decision to stay at the end of Texas comes with notable qualifications. She realizes that home is where you're surrounded by critters that care about ya, and declares she's staying. This sounds like personal growth, but it also sounds like making peace with a situation she cannot change. Sandy doesn't say she's choosing to stay instead of returning to Texas. She says she's staying because she's found something meaningful where she already is. The distinction matters. She's not rejecting Texas, she's accepting Bikini Bottom as a substitute for something she can't have. The theory connects to Sandy's occasional references to past incidents that the show never fully explains. She has skills that suggest military or covert operations training. She demonstrates knowledge of demolitions, combat techniques, and survival strategies that exceed normal civilian experience. Whatever Sandy did before Bikini Bottom involved activities that would make exile a plausible consequence. Texas might have sent her away to prevent her from causing further problems, to remove her from situations she kept escalating, or to protect others from whatever made her dangerous in the first place. Sandy Cheeks is serving a sentence disguised as a research mission. Her dome is a prison with life support. Her isolation from her own species is the punishment. Her homesickness is the constant reminder of what she lost. The only way she survives emotionally is by building relationships with creatures who will never fully understand what she's going through, creatures who breathe water and live freely in an environment that would kill her instantly. Sandy's cheerful adaptation to Bikini Bottom isn't resilience. It's the coping mechanism of someone who has accepted that she's never going home, no matter how much she wants to. Here we go. Next theory. The Plankton Victory Reset Theory. Plankton has failed to steal the Krabby Patty formula thousands of times across the series. His schemes range from elaborate technological assaults to pathetic disguises that fool absolutely no one. Each attempt ends in humiliation, defeat, and often physical pain. Any rational being would have abandoned this obsession decades ago. The repeated failures should have broken him. Instead, Plankton maintains an unwavering confidence that his next plan will succeed, a certainty that defies all available evidence. The theory suggests an explanation. Plankton has already won once. The events of the SpongeBob SquarePants movie represent a timeline where Plan Z succeeded completely, and something reset reality to before his victory. Plankton's irrational confidence stems from subconscious memory of having actually achieved his goal. The SpongeBob SquarePants movie shows Plankton executing his most successful scheme ever. He steals King Neptune's crown and frames Mr. Krabs for the theft. Neptune freezes Krabs and threatens execution. While SpongeBob and Patrick embark on a seemingly doomed quest to Shell City, Plankton walks into the Krusty Krab, takes the secret formula directly from the safe, and begins selling Krabby Patties at the Chum Bucket. He distributes free bucket helmets with every purchase. Once enough citizens wear the helmets, he activates their mind control function and enslaves the entire population of Bikini Bottom. Every resident becomes a drone chanting, "All hail Plankton." He forces them to build monuments to his glory. He even captures King Neptune himself with a helmet, giving Plankton control over the most powerful being in the ocean. For a significant period of time within the movie's narrative, Plankton has won completely. He possesses the formula, he controls the population, he commands a god. Bikini Bottom has been renamed Planktopolis. His slaves construct statues in his image. Karen sits beside him as he rules from a throne. This isn't a near victory or a temporary advantage. This is total, absolute triumph. Plankton experiences the full reality of having achieved everything he ever wanted. The victory unravels through a sequence of events so improbable they border on miraculous. SpongeBob and Patrick survive the journey to Shell City despite having no resources, no vehicle, and no apparent survival skills. They are captured by the Cyclops and literally die under a heat lamp, only to be resurrected by their own tears activating a sprinkler system. They somehow encounter David Hasselhoff, who launches them back to Bikini Bottom from his chest. SpongeBob defeats the mind control helmets by playing an electric guitar so righteously that the helmets cannot handle this level of rock and roll. The probability of this sequence occurring approaches 0. The movie's ending feels less like a natural resolution and more like a cosmic correction. Reality itself seems to reject Plankton's victory. Every impossible coincidence aligns perfectly to undo what he accomplished. The universe conspires to restore the status quo with such precision that it suggests intervention rather than chance. SpongeBob doesn't outsmart Plankton or overcome him through superior planning. He defeats enslaved Neptune and an army of mind-controlled citizens through the power of a song about being a goofy goober. This isn't narrative logic. This is reality being overwritten. After the movie, Plankton returns to his pattern of constant failure. He continues scheming, continues being defeated, continues suffering humiliation. The show proceeds as if the movie never happened. Bikini Bottom shows no memory of having been enslaved. No one references the time Plankton controlled their minds. Neptune doesn't mention almost executing an innocent crab. The complete absence of consequences suggests the events were somehow erased from the timeline, leaving only the faintest traces in the subconscious minds of those who experienced them. Plankton's confidence throughout the series makes no sense without hidden knowledge. He has failed at the same goal for over 2 decades of continuous effort. His plans are often absurd. His disguises are transparent. His technology frequently malfunctions. Mr. Krabs defeats him repeatedly with minimal effort. SpongeBob thwarts him almost accidentally. By any reasonable measure, Plankton should have concluded long ago that stealing the formula is impossible and found some other purpose for his life. Instead, he maintains absolute certainty that victory is achievable and imminent. This certainty suggests memory of having already succeeded. Plankton doesn't believe he can win because he's delusional. He believes he can win because somewhere in his subconscious, he knows he already did. The taste of victory lingers, even if the conscious memory has been erased. His body remembers sitting on the throne. His mind retains the shadow of commanding Neptune. His soul recalls the satisfaction of finally holding the formula. These phantom memories drive his continued obsession when logic would demand surrender. Karen's behavior throughout the series supports this interpretation. She frequently expresses skepticism about Plankton's chances while simultaneously helping him plan. She points out flaws in his schemes while never suggesting he give up entirely. This pattern makes sense if Karen also carries subconscious memory of Plan Z's success. She knows they can win because she experienced it. She also knows something went wrong, something undid their victory, something they need to avoid repeating. Her caution reflects awareness that triumph once achieved can be mysteriously reversed. The movie explicitly positions itself as a culmination, an ending to SpongeBob's journey that sees him achieve his dream of becoming manager. Creator Steven Hillenburg intended the movie as a finale to the series. When the show continued afterward, it effectively reset the narrative to before the movie's events. SpongeBob remains a fry cook. The Krusty Krab 2 doesn't exist. Mr. Krabs never experienced near execution. The movie exists in a timeline that the show's continuation has overwritten. If the protagonist's victory was reset, then Plankton's defeat was also reset, meaning his victory was real before reality corrected itself. Plankton's reaction to failures throughout the show contains subtle hints of déjà vu. He sometimes seems surprised by defeats that should be entirely predictable. He expresses shock when simple plans fail despite having experienced identical failures hundreds of times. He acts as though success should be the default outcome, as though something keeps going wrong that shouldn't be going wrong. This makes sense if his baseline expectation was set by a timeline where he won. Every failure feels like an aberration because his subconscious insists that he should be ruling Planktopolis right now. The theory explains why Plankton never evolves his approach despite constant failure. He continues using the same general strategies because he knows one of them worked. He's not failing to learn from his mistakes. He's trying to recreate success he actually achieved. Plan Z succeeded. Something external reversed the outcome. Plankton needs to figure out how to win in a way that sticks. In a way that whatever force reset reality cannot undo. His apparent insanity is actually a rational response to having experienced timeline manipulation. Sheldon J. Plankton, remembers victory at a level below conscious awareness. He tasted absolute power and had it taken from him by forces beyond his comprehension. His relentless scheming isn't the desperation of someone who can't accept defeat. It's the determination of someone who knows success is possible because he already lived it. Somewhere in the multiverse, Planktopolis still stands. Somewhere, the slaves still chant. Somewhere, Plankton won and reality didn't fight back. He just needs to find his way back to that timeline, to recreate the sequence of events that gave him everything he ever wanted. The formula is his. He just has to figure out how to keep it. On to the next theory we go. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel, the Tattletail Strangler Contract Theory. The Tattletail Strangler has a simple operating principle. He strangles people who report him to authorities. This creates a cycle of violence that should logically result in his eventual capture, since every crime generates a witness who then becomes a victim, which generates more witnesses. The Strangler's continued freedom suggests he's either supernaturally good at avoiding detection, or that his reputation serves a purpose beyond personal revenge. SpongeBob meets the Strangler, presents what appears to be a straightforward scenario. SpongeBob reports the Strangler for littering, the Strangler escapes custody to seek revenge. The theory circulating through fan discussions proposes something darker. The littering was staged, SpongeBob witnessed something he shouldn't have, and the Strangler was hired to eliminate him before he could talk. The episode opens with SpongeBob on early morning litter patrol, a duty he takes with religious seriousness. He describes himself as hoping Neptune will shine brightly on my harvest. This isn't casual cleanup. This is ritualistic behavior, a patrol route that SpongeBob follows with precision timing. Someone who wanted to know exactly where SpongeBob would be at a specific time could easily predict his location. The Strangler sits in a car throwing trash onto the ground directly in front of SpongeBob, piece after piece, until SpongeBob approaches the vehicle. This isn't careless littering. This is bait. The trash falls in an escalating pattern designed to draw SpongeBob closer. First a candy wrapper, then more debris. Then a continuous stream that SpongeBob describes as an epidemic. Finally, a piece of litter attached to a parachute, which is absurd enough to demand investigation. The Strangler isn't casually disposing of garbage. He's creating a trail that leads directly to his car window, ensuring SpongeBob will confront him and create the justification for what comes next. The Strangler needs SpongeBob to report him. That's the entire point. When SpongeBob approaches the car to cite the littering violation, the Strangler responds with mockery. "What are you gonna do, call the police?" This is not the behavior of someone who fears law enforcement. This is someone who knows exactly what will happen next and has planned for it. The police arrive immediately, as if they were already nearby waiting for the call. They begin handcuffing the Strangler in a bizarrely elaborate fashion, walking past him in single file to continue adding restraints. The arrest itself feels performative, a show designed to establish SpongeBob as the tattletale who triggered it. The Strangler's escape from police custody happens with suspicious ease. Officer Nancy says, "Oops, not again," when she notices he's gone, suggesting this is a regular occurrence. Officer Johnson confirms, "Yup, he got away with no apparent concern." They leave SpongeBob standing alone after calling him Tattletail, establishing his identity for anyone who might be watching. If the goal was to mark SpongeBob as the Strangler's next target, the police couldn't have done a better job. If the goal was to actually keep a dangerous criminal contained, they failed completely. The disparity suggests their priorities weren't aligned with public safety. The theory proposes that SpongeBob saw something during his litter patrol that he didn't consciously register as significant. His route takes him through the Krusty Krab parking lot, an area adjacent to multiple businesses and potentially visible to activities occurring before normal operating hours. The Strangler's presence in that specific location at that specific time may not have been about littering at all. He may have been disposing of evidence, conducting surveillance, or meeting with someone who couldn't afford to be seen. SpongeBob's approach interrupted something, and now SpongeBob needs to be silenced. The Strangler's subsequent behavior supports this interpretation. He doesn't simply attack SpongeBob when he has the opportunity. He poses as a bodyguard and insists on getting SpongeBob alone inside his house with all the lights off. He wants a nice, quiet, secluded location where no one can hear you being strangled. This is professional elimination methodology, not personal revenge. A criminal motivated purely by anger would attack immediately. A hired killer would ensure there are no witnesses and no evidence. The Strangler's patience suggests he's operating under professional standards. SpongeBob's obliviousness throughout the episode takes on new significance in this context. He doesn't recognize the Strangler despite having seen his face during the arrest. He doesn't notice the fake mustache or the receipt from Phony Baloney Mustache Emporium. He doesn't register any of the Strangler's verbal slips about strangling, choking, and crushing windpipes. This level of unawareness extends beyond comedy. SpongeBob genuinely cannot process threats, which means he also couldn't process whatever he witnessed that made him a target. He saw something incriminating and has no idea what it was. The parties that interrupt the Strangler's attempts suggest SpongeBob has protections he doesn't understand. His friends arrive for a surprise celebration of his 100% on-time work record, then return for a birthday party based on invitations SpongeBob supposedly sent. SpongeBob seems confused about both events, asking, "How'd you guys know?" These gatherings feel less like coincidence and more like intervention. Someone is ensuring SpongeBob is never alone with the Strangler long enough for the job to be completed. Someone is sabotaging the hit. Patrick's role in the episode supports this interpretation. He appears at crucial moments to interrupt the Strangler's attempts. When the Strangler finally gets SpongeBob alone, Patrick emerges out of nowhere to delay the attack. The Strangler tries to remove Patrick by convincing SpongeBob that Patrick might be the Strangler, and Patrick immediately runs off to turn myself in. This draws the Strangler into screaming his true identity, which brings everyone back for another party. Patrick functions as protection SpongeBob didn't know he had, whether through luck, loyalty, or something more deliberate. The Strangler's ultimate fate reinforces the contract interpretation. He doesn't escape justice through his usual methods. He ends up in jail through a series of escalating disasters, each triggered by his own attempts to flee SpongeBob. He jumps from an airplane and lands directly in the police station jail. This isn't bad luck. This is narrative correction. The universe ensures the contract cannot be completed. The Strangler was hired to silence someone who couldn't be silenced, targeted someone protected by forces that don't need to reveal themselves. Mr. Krabs' reaction when SpongeBob shows him the Strangler's wanted poster suggests awareness of larger stakes. Krabs immediately retreats into his shell and tells SpongeBob to go away and take your death cloud with you. This isn't cowardice about a random criminal. This is someone who recognizes that SpongeBob has become involved in something dangerous, something Krabs doesn't want touching his business. Larry the Lobster, construction workers, and tough guys at a bar all react with similar terror. The Strangler is connected to something that terrifies people who should be difficult to intimidate. The theory connects to broader patterns in Bikini Bottom's underworld. The Krusty Krab sits at the center of a competitive restaurant industry where industrial espionage is constant and violence is implied. The Chum Bucket's owner has repeatedly attempted theft, sabotage, and mind control. Mr. Krabs has a murky past involving the Navy, piracy, and activities he never fully explains. SpongeBob works at the nexus of these conflicts, present for countless suspicious activities without ever understanding what he's seeing. He's the perfect accidental witness, always there, never comprehending, potentially devastating if he ever connected the dots. SpongeBob witnessed something that morning in the parking lot. Something worth hiring a professional killer to address. Something connected to operations that operate beneath Bikini Bottom's cheerful surface. The littering was a pretext. The arrest was theater. The escape was planned. The Strangler wasn't seeking personal revenge for being reported. He was completing a contract to eliminate a witness who didn't know what he knew. SpongeBob survived not through cleverness or combat ability, but through protections he doesn't understand, friends who arrived when needed, and a universe that apparently decided he wasn't allowed to die. The Strangler sits in jail now, his contract unfulfilled, waiting to explain to whoever hired him why the job couldn't be completed. SpongeBob continues his litter patrol, oblivious to the forces that tried to silence him and the forces that kept him alive. Let's keep it going with the next theory. The Bikini Bottom time loop theory. SpongeBob SquarePants has celebrated multiple birthdays across the series. His friends have thrown him surprise parties, given him presents, and marked the occasion with varying degrees of enthusiasm depending on who's organizing. SpongeBob's big birthday blowout represents perhaps the most elaborate celebration yet, involving a surface world tour, celebrity cameos, and a massive surprise party that destroys his house. At the end of the episode, Patrick asks the most dangerous question possible in Bikini Bottom. By the way, SpongeBob, how old are you? SpongeBob begins to answer. Well, as of today, I am, and the screen cuts to static. The show refuses to let him complete the sentence. The theory that has emerged from this moment suggests Bikini Bottom exists in a temporal loop where no one ages because time itself resets, and certain characters experience this repetition with varying degrees of awareness. The episode provides multiple pieces of evidence for cyclical time. SpongeBob wakes up and immediately knows it's his birthday, despite claiming he never pays attention to those sorts of things. His alarm clock announces it. Gary has prepared a present. Streamers and confetti explode from his bed. The day arrives with the inevitability of a programmed event rather than the surprise of an organic occurrence. SpongeBob has celebrated this exact birthday before. He will celebrate it again. The loop ensures that certain days happen on schedule regardless of what came before or after. Patrick's behavior throughout the episode demonstrates the cognitive effects of temporal repetition. Sandy spends all night explaining a simple plan to him, and he cannot retain the information. His brain literally catches fire from the strain of holding two concepts simultaneously. Yet when his alarm goes off, Patrick suddenly knows exactly what he's supposed to do. Oh, would you look at the hour? It's almost time for me to take SpongeBob on that tour so you guys can decorate his house. The information exists in Patrick not because he learned it, but because this is what Patrick does on this day. His conscious mind can't process new information because his subconscious already contains the entire loop's worth of experiences. The Surface World Tour reveals that the loop extends beyond Bikini Bottom. The Trusty Slab restaurant contains exact parallels to underwater characters: Jim Bob, SpongeBob, Mr. Slabs Mr., Krabs Mr., Manward, Squidward, Patrick's live-action counterpart, Carol Sandy, Mr. Charleston, Plankton, and Pearl Slabs. These aren't coincidental similarities. These are the same patterns repeating across different environments. The loop imposes specific relationship dynamics and conflict structures wherever consciousness exists. Mr. Charleston tries to steal the secret sauce recipe. Carol uses karate. Jim Bob obsesses over cooking patties to perfection. The same story plays out everywhere because the same story is the only story that exists. Rube attempts to sing Happy Birthday to SpongeBob multiple times throughout the tour, and each attempt is interrupted by external events. Patrick causes chaos with beans. A road hog appears. The bus gets trapped in a fish store. The lever accidentally activates. The universe actively prevents the birthday song from being completed, as if acknowledging SpongeBob's age would create a paradox the timeline cannot resolve. If SpongeBob is officially 1 year older, time has passed. If time has passed, the loop would break. The interruptions aren't coincidences. They're the temporal structure protecting itself from contradiction. The surprise party at SpongeBob's house descends into chaos that literally destroys his home. Walls collapse. Sections of the building fall apart. Party guests cause structural damage that should render the pineapple uninhabitable. Yet when SpongeBob arrives, he responds with pure joy. A surprise party? For me? He shows no concern about the destruction because he knows, on some level, that it doesn't matter. The house will be restored. It's always restored. The loop ensures that SpongeBob's pineapple exists at the beginning of each cycle, regardless of what happens to it during the cycle. SpongeBob's closing monologue carries unsettling implications when viewed through the time loop lens. He looks at the destroyed remains of his home and says, "I live in the bestest place in the whole wide world, Bikini Bottom, where nothing bad can ever happen, and there's nothing to ever be scared of. This is either profound delusion or complete awareness. Nothing bad can happen because nothing that happens is permanent. There's nothing to be scared of because consequences don't persist." SpongeBob might be the most aware character in Bikini Bottom, fully understanding that reality resets and choosing to embrace the eternal present rather than fight it. Squidward's behavior throughout the series suggests a different relationship with the loop. He alone seems to experience genuine despair about his circumstances. He alone recognizes that his dreams will never be achieved, that his neighbors will never change, that his life will never improve. At the end of the birthday song, as everyone cheers, Squidward can be heard saying, "I still don't like you." This isn't character consistency. This is someone who has experienced this exact celebration thousands of times and no longer has the energy to pretend. Squidward remembers. Squidward knows. Squidward is trapped in hell, and the hell is awareness. The static that interrupts SpongeBob's answer about his age represents the loop's most aggressive self-protection mechanism. The question of age implies the passage of time. The passage of time implies change. Change implies that the loop might eventually end. The timeline cannot permit this information to exist, so it erases the moment entirely. We don't hear SpongeBob's age not because the show is being coy with continuity, but because within the show's reality, that information literally cannot be spoken. The words would destroy everything. Patrick's relationship with the purple fish he meets at the pet store demonstrates how the loop handles attachment. He falls in love instantly, experiences genuine emotion, and then watches her swim away as the bus descends back to Bikini Bottom. He blows a kiss. She responds. Then they're separated forever, except forever in a time loop means nothing. Patrick will meet this fish again. He will fall in love again. He will lose her again. His ability to form instant, deep attachments might be because he's formed this exact attachment countless times before, each iteration strengthening the emotional pathway without retaining the specific memory. The presence of Patchy the pirate creates a bridge between the animated and live-action worlds that complicates the loop's boundaries. Patchy knows SpongeBob exists. Patchy travels to deliver a birthday present. Patchy ends up with his head separated from his body, swapped with his parrot, with no apparent concern about the impossibility of his situation. Patchy might be the loop's administrator, the external entity who ensures that birthday celebrations occur on schedule and that the proper narrative beats are maintained. His cheerful acceptance of body horror suggests someone who has seen far stranger things in his role as temporal maintenance. The celebrities wishing SpongeBob happy birthday exist outside Bikini Bottom's reality entirely. David Hasselhoff, who has physically interacted with the underwater world before, appears both in the episode and in the celebrity montage. This suggests multiple layers of reality all synchronized to celebrate SpongeBob's birthday simultaneously. The loop organizes all of existence around ensuring that certain events occur at certain times for certain characters. SpongeBob's birthday is a fixed point that reality itself acknowledges. The episode's dedication to Steve Hillenburg, the show's creator who passed away before the episode aired, adds a metatextual layer to the time loop theory. Hillenburg created this world. He established its rules. He determined that SpongeBob would never age, that relationships would never fundamentally change, that the status quo would always be restored. The time loop isn't a glitch in Bikini Bottom's reality. It's the fundamental design principle that allows the show to exist indefinitely. Characters cannot age because aging would end the story. The loop is the story. SpongeBob's Big Birthday Blowout confirms what the series has demonstrated for over 2 decades. Time in Bikini Bottom operates differently than time anywhere else. Characters celebrate birthdays without getting older. Houses are destroyed and restored without explanation. The same conflicts repeat with the same outcomes. The same relationships persist without development. Squidward's clarinet never improves. Plankton never succeeds. SpongeBob never matures. The loop ensures that tomorrow will be functionally identical to today, which was functionally identical to yesterday, which was functionally identical to 20 years ago. The only question is whether the characters know, and the answer varies by character. SpongeBob has found peace. Patrick has found oblivion. Squidward has found despair. And somewhere outside the loop, Patchy keeps delivering presents, ensuring that the birthday that never ends continues forever. Next theory coming your way. The Patchy the Pirate Interdimensional Observer Theory. Patchy the Pirate presents himself as the president of the SpongeBob SquarePants fan club, a surface-dwelling human who simply enjoys a children's cartoon character. His segments frame the animated episodes as entertainment, stories he shares with his audience about characters who exist in a fictional underwater world. Christmas Who reveals something far stranger about Patchy's relationship with Bikini Bottom. He sees SpongeBob in real time. He knows what SpongeBob is doing at specific moments. He interacts with Bikini Bottom's reality in ways that suggest genuine interdimensional perception rather than fan enthusiasm. The theory proposes that Patchy has somehow discovered a method to observe Bikini Bottom directly, and his fan club activities are actually attempts to document and make contact with a world most humans cannot perceive. The episode opens with Patchy wrapping presents while singing, a normal holiday activity. Then he addresses the camera and notices he's on air, suggesting awareness of broadcasting. But his next statement contradicts simple television hosting. I'll bet old SpongeBob is gearing up for Santa Claus right now. He picks up a picture of SpongeBob and the show cuts directly to SpongeBob responding, I sure am. SpongeBob then activates an elaborate chimney mechanism, directly answering Patchy's speculation. This isn't narration. This is communication. Patchy made a statement about SpongeBob's activities, and SpongeBob confirmed it as if he heard the observation. Patchy continues demonstrating real-time knowledge of Bikini Bottom events. He picks up a picture of Patrick and states that Patrick is doing his share of the decorating. The show cuts to Patrick standing by his rock with a single ornament that immediately falls off. Patchy couldn't know this from watching a pre-recorded show. He's observing events as they happen, commenting on actions that occur in response to his attention. The pictures he holds might function as viewing portals, windows that allow him to focus his perception on specific individuals in Bikini Bottom. The production of Patchy's segments reveals technology that shouldn't exist for a simple fan club president. He has a full television set in his home with professional lighting. He has a puppet parrot named Potty who demonstrates independent movement and personality. He has access to broadcasting equipment that allows him to address children directly. He receives fan mail about SpongeBob that he answers with authority, as if he has inside knowledge about the character's preferences and history. The infrastructure surrounding Patchy suggests an operation far more sophisticated than amateur enthusiasm. Patchy's claim that there was a time when no one had even heard of Christmas in Bikini Bottom demonstrates historical knowledge about the underwater world. He doesn't say, there was a time in the story, or according to the show. He speaks as a historian recounting factual events he has access to. He then promises to tell the story of SpongeBob's very first Christmas, narrating events he presents as having actually occurred. His narration appears as voiceover during the animated segments, and so, Sandy wove the magical tale of gumdrops and penny whistles. Patchy isn't describing fiction. He's documenting events he witnessed through whatever method allows him to perceive Bikini Bottom. The episode's structure alternates between Patchy's live-action segments and the animated Christmas story in ways that suggest active observation rather than passive viewing. Patchy interrupts the story to ask rhetorical questions. Is Squidward right? Can there be a Christmas under the sea? Stay tuned. He's not reading from a script, he's watching events unfold and questioning their outcome. When the story reaches a pause point, Patchy expresses genuine uncertainty about what will happen next, suggesting he observes Bikini Bottom without full knowledge of future events. Patchy's relationship with Patty provides clues about how he might have discovered Bikini Bottom. Patty is a puppet who somehow operates with independent agency, squawking responses that Patchy doesn't control, eating cookie dough when Patchy tries to stop him, and generally behaving as a conscious entity despite being strings and fabric. If Patchy has access to technology or magic that can animate puppets, he might have access to perception-altering capabilities that let him see into underwater dimensions. Patty could be a side effect of the same forces that opened Patchy's connection to Bikini Bottom. The fan mail segment demonstrates that Patchy's knowledge extends beyond observation to interpretation. A child writes asking if SpongeBob likes Christmas. Patchy doesn't say, "I don't know, let's watch and find out." He immediately responds by telling the story of SpongeBob's first Christmas, implying he has comprehensive knowledge of SpongeBob's history with the holiday. He knows not just what SpongeBob is doing now, but what SpongeBob has experienced in the past. This suggests either long-term observation or access to some form of records about Bikini Bottom's timeline. Patchy's physical location in Encino, California, places him nowhere near the ocean, yet his entire identity centers on underwater characters. His house is decorated with SpongeBob paraphernalia. His Christmas tree features ornaments shaped like SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward. He bakes cookies in their likenesses. This obsessive documentation behavior mirrors how researchers study subjects they cannot directly interact with. Patchy collects evidence of Bikini Bottom's existence because he cannot physically travel there, compensating for his inability to make direct contact by surrounding himself with representations of what he observes. The ending of Christmas Who provides the strongest evidence for Patchy's genuine connection to Bikini Bottom. He operates a sailboat puppet show featuring SpongeBob and Patrick approaching Christmas Island. The puppets speak dialogue that Patchy voices, but they also respond to a storm that Patchy creates with sound effects. The puppets are on Patchy's head, physically attached to him, yet they seem to interact with the scenario he describes. When the segment ends, the man on set has to call his name to break his focus, suggesting Patchy enters a trance-like state when connecting with Bikini Bottom's narrative. The theory explains why Patchy refers to SpongeBob with such personal familiarity. He calls him Old SpongeBob and Our Pal SpongeBob, language that implies relationship rather than fandom. He expresses genuine concern when events in Bikini Bottom take negative turns. He celebrates when characters succeed. His emotional investment suggests he views SpongeBob as a real person he has come to care about through years of observation, not a fictional character he enjoys from a distance. Patchy's attempts to contact Bikini Bottom may be the purpose behind his broadcasting. By creating a fan club and producing television segments, he generates attention and energy focused on SpongeBob's world. If consciousness or collective belief plays any role in the connection between dimensions, Patchy's efforts to spread awareness of Bikini Bottom might strengthen the bridge between worlds. Every child who watches his segments and thinks about SpongeBob might contribute to whatever force allows Patchy to perceive the underwater dimension. The French narrator's presence in both Patchy segments and Bikini Bottom scenes creates another connection point. The same voice that describes events in the animated world also appears in Patchy's reality, signing off at the episode's end by saying goodnight and happy holidays while Patchy chases Patty in the background. The narrator exists in both dimensions simultaneously, suggesting that the barrier between Patchy's world and Bikini Bottom is more permeable than it appears. Patchy may have discovered a gap that others don't know exists. Patchy the pirate sits in his Encino home surrounded by images of creatures who live at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. He speaks to them through photographs. He narrates their history. He celebrates their holidays. He dedicates his life to documenting their existence and sharing their stories with anyone who will listen. This isn't the behavior of a casual fan. This is the behavior of someone who has seen something impossible and cannot stop looking. Patchy discovered Bikini Bottom, and his fan club is the cover story he uses to process and share what he observes. Somewhere between the surface world and the seafloor, there's a window that only Patchy knows how to look through. He's been watching for years. He's been trying to tell us. And every time he picks up a picture of SpongeBob and says, "I'll bet he's doing something right now," SpongeBob answers, because somewhere in the depths, SpongeBob can feel Patchy watching. Let's switch over to the next theory, the chum ingredient theory. Chum is a real substance. In the surface world, fishermen use it to attract prey by throwing ground-up fish parts into the water. The smell draws larger fish to the area where they can be caught. Chum consists of fish blood, fish bones, fish organs, and fish flesh, all processed together into an oily, pungent slurry. Plankton operates a restaurant called the Chum Bucket in a city populated entirely by sentient fish. He serves a product called chum to potential customers who are themselves fish. The implications of this arrangement have generated one of the darkest theories in SpongeBob fandom. Plankton's chum is made from processed Bikini Bottom citizens, and the reason no one eats it is because they instinctively recognize they're being offered their own kind. Plankton's regular reveals that Nat, the one customer who apparently enjoys chum, was being paid by Karen to eat it. The episode makes clear that no one has voluntarily consumed Plankton's product in years. When Mr. Krabs attempts to replicate the chum recipe, Nat describes it as the second foulest thing I've ever tasted, and immediately vomits. After eating 10 chum sticks as part of Karen's paid arrangement, Nat has visited the doctor twice and requires his stomach pumped. The chum is medically dangerous to consume. This suggests ingredients that fish biology specifically rejects, ingredients that register as wrong on a fundamental level. The episode establishes that Plankton genuinely doesn't know why his food fails. He expresses sincere confusion and despair about his empty restaurant. He hasn't had a customer in years, and considers himself a complete failure. When Nat first arrives, Plankton's eye pops out in shock at someone actually wanting his product. He didn't expect success because he's never understood why chum repels customers. If Plankton knew his secret ingredient was processed citizens, he would presumably understand the marketing problem. His ignorance suggests he acquired the chum recipe or ingredients without full knowledge of what they contain. Karen's willingness to pay someone to eat chum reveals that even Plankton's own wife knows the food is fundamentally inedible. She doesn't try to improve the recipe or suggest alternative ingredients. She simply pays someone to fake enjoyment so Plankton will stop complaining. Karen, as a computer, likely knows exactly what's in the chum. Her solution isn't to address the ingredient problem, but to create the illusion of success. She's managing Plankton's mental health rather than fixing his business model, suggesting the business model cannot be fixed without changing something Plankton can't or won't change. The theory connects to Bikini Bottom's suspicious population dynamics. Citizens appear and disappear throughout the series without explanation. Background characters who appear in one episode may never be seen again. The city maintains roughly consistent population levels despite no visible immigration or birth rates. Fish die in various episodes from accidents, conflicts, and disasters, but Bikini Bottom never seems to run out of citizens. If something were processing excess population into commercial products, it would explain both the population's stability and the availability of fish-based ingredients in an underwater economy. Plankton's acquisition of chum ingredients remains unexplained throughout the series. He operates a failing restaurant with no apparent income, yet he maintains a steady supply of product. Raw materials cost money, processing costs money, storage costs money. The chum bucket shows no evidence of fishing operations, hunting expeditions, or trade relationships that would provide fish-based ingredients. Either Plankton receives his supplies from an unknown source, or he processes locally available organic material. In Bikini Bottom, locally available organic material means the citizens themselves. The name Chum Bucket takes on sinister implications when examined closely. A bucket is a container for collecting things. Chum is ground fish. The restaurant's name literally describes a container for collecting ground fish in a city of fish people. Plankton may have named his establishment honestly without recognizing the horror of what he was describing. He's small enough that the full picture escapes him. He sees individual ingredients without connecting them to the society he lives in. Nat's physical reaction to prolonged chum consumption suggests his body recognized something wrong. He requires medical intervention to remove it from his system. His stomach specifically rejects the substance in ways that go beyond normal food poisoning. The body has evolved responses to prevent cannibalism in many species, triggering nausea, rejection, and revulsion when confronted with same-species flesh. Nat's extreme physical response mirrors what would happen if his digestive system recognized it was processing fish tissue while being a fish. Mr. Krabs' attempt to create competing chum fails spectacularly, suggesting the recipe requires specific knowledge or ingredients he lacks. He has access to the same general food supplies as Plankton. He operates a successful restaurant with functional recipes, yet his chum is even worse than Plankton's, which Nat describes as only the second foulest thing he's tasted. The implication is that proper chum requires something Mr. Krabs doesn't have access to, something that distinguishes Plankton's supply chain from normal food service operations. The theory explains why Plankton obsesses over the Krabby Patty formula rather than improving his own product. If chum fundamentally cannot be made appealing because of what it contains, no recipe adjustment would help. Plankton needs an entirely different product. The Krabby Patty represents food that fish can actually eat without biological rejection responses. Plankton's decades-long quest for the formula is survival. His current business model is built on ingredients that his target market physically cannot consume. Karen's behavior throughout the series supports her awareness of the chum's nature. She repeatedly undermines Plankton's schemes, often in ways that prevent him from achieving success. If success meant expanding chum production, it would require more ingredients. More ingredients would mean more processed citizens. Karen may be deliberately sabotaging her husband not out of malice but out of recognition that his success would require atrocities he doesn't consciously intend. She keeps him small because small means limited harm. The episode's irony fixation takes on darker meaning in this context. Mr. Krabs declares he's never enjoyed myself more, watching Plankton's despair. SpongeBob mentions triple irony while Plankton suffers. The characters discuss ironic situations without recognizing the most profound irony of all. They're watching a man mourn his inability to successfully serve his neighbors to themselves. The comedy of Plankton's failure masks a horror that no character in the episode can perceive because none of them have connected the dots about what chum actually is. Plankton's final lament carries weight the character doesn't intend. Why would anyone ever eat my slop? He frames this as self-pity about his cooking abilities. The actual answer is that no one eats his slop because his customers are the slop. The cannibalistic nature of the enterprise ensures its failure not through market forces but through biological imperative. Evolution has programmed fish to reject fish, and no amount of seasoning or preparation can override millions of years of survival instinct. Plankton serves a product that his customers' bodies recognize as themselves, and their bodies refuse to cooperate with his business plan. The chum bucket sits across from the Krusty Krab, two restaurants offering fundamentally different relationships with their customers. The Krusty Krab serves food made from unknown ingredients that fish happily consume. The chum bucket serves food made from the customer's own species, and bodies rebel against the consumption. Plankton doesn't understand his failure because he doesn't understand his product. Somewhere in his supply chain, something processes Bikini Bottom's citizens into his inventory. He seasons them, shapes them into sticks, and offers them to their friends and neighbors. They refuse, instinct, screaming that something is deeply wrong, and Plankton cries alone in his empty restaurant, wondering why no one appreciates his cooking. Time for the next theory. The Old Man Jenkins title theory. Old Man Jenkins appears throughout the SpongeBob SquarePants series as a recurring background character, except he's not consistent. Sometimes he's green, sometimes he's tan, sometimes he's fish-shaped, sometimes he's more humanoid. He operates a farm in some episodes and works as a sailor in others. He has different voices, different body types, and different personalities depending on when he appears. The show treats Old Man Jenkins as a single character, but the visual and narrative evidence suggests otherwise. The Sponge Who Could Fly presents Jenkins in 3 distinct roles within the same episode: farmer, lighthouse user, and human cannonball. The theory proposes that Old Man Jenkins is not a person but a title, a position in Bikini Bottom society that passes to different individuals, explaining why the character changes so dramatically between appearances. The episode introduces Jenkins as Farmer Jenkins, owner of a grain silo that SpongeBob's failed flying machine damages. He chases SpongeBob and Patrick away while shouting his signature line, "I knew no good would come from city folk and their flying machines." This Jenkins operates a farm, speaks with rural affect, and demonstrates territorial behavior about his property. He exists in a land-based agricultural context, growing food for Bikini Bottom's population. Later in the same episode, Jenkins appears as Sailor Jenkins, piloting a boat through Goo Lagoon when the lighthouse goes dark. He declares, "I'm glad I gave up farming," which the show presents as continuity with Farmer Jenkins. But the transition makes little sense for a single individual. Farming and sailing require completely different skill sets, equipment, and lifestyles. The statement works better as one Jenkins acknowledging the career of a previous Jenkins, glad that his iteration of the role doesn't involve agricultural labor. After SpongeBob fixes the lighthouse, Sailor Jenkins crashes into rocks and begins sinking while shouting the same phrase about city folk and flying machines. This verbal tick appears across Jenkins' appearances like a ritual utterance, words that define the role rather than express individual opinion. Every Jenkins distrusts technology. Every Jenkins resents urban influence. Every Jenkins warns against innovation. These aren't personality traits. They're job requirements. The episode's climax introduces Cannonball Jenkins, who shoots himself from a cannon to intercept SpongeBob's flight. The crowd recognizes him immediately. It's Cannonball Jenkins. This suggests a known identity, a famous performer whose cannon act has established local reputation. Yet Cannonball Jenkins emerges seamlessly from a context where Farmer Jenkins and Sailor Jenkins already exist in the same time frame. Either Bikini Bottom contains multiple people named Jenkins with similar speech patterns and worldviews, or the name designates a social function rather than biological identity. The series shows wildly different versions of Jenkins across its run. In Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy 4, he appears as a green fish in a wheelchair. In Party Pooper Pants, he's a tan fish with a different body shape. In the SpongeBob SquarePants movie, he's Farmer Jenkins again. In Plankton's Army, he's shown with yet another appearance. The wiki lists multiple Old Man Jenkins characters because the show's own continuity cannot reconcile them as one being. The production treats Jenkins as a type rather than a character. The title theory explains why Jenkins always represents traditional values against modern change. Bikini Bottom needs someone to voice skepticism about progress, to warn against the dangers of innovation, to represent the perspective of those who remember when things were simpler. This is a necessary social role, not a personal preference. When one Jenkins dies or becomes too old to continue, another citizen assumes the title, the warnings, and the curmudgeonly disposition that defines the position. The phrase Old Man Jenkins contains two components that suggest inherited status. Old Man indicates advanced age, establishing authority through seniority. Jenkins functions as a family name, but one that could pass through lineages or be adopted upon assuming the role. Medieval guilds operated similarly. A master smith wasn't necessarily born smith, but earned the title through achieving mastery. Jenkins might work the same way, earned through demonstrating appropriate levels of rural wisdom and technological suspicion. Farmer Jenkins owns land, a significant asset in any society. Sailor Jenkins operates a boat, another valuable resource. Cannonball Jenkins possesses specialized equipment and performance skills. Each Jenkins controls means of production or entertainment that benefit the community. The title might carry economic inheritance alongside its social function, ensuring that whoever becomes Jenkins gains access to the previous Jenkins assets. This would explain why Jenkins always has resources despite being perpetually elderly. The crowd's reaction to Cannonball Jenkins reveals community familiarity with the title system. No one questions why a farmer is suddenly shooting himself from a cannon. No one asks how a sailor became a performer. They simply recognize Cannonball Jenkins as a known entity and trust his intervention. This acceptance suggests experience with Jenkins' transitions, an understanding that the name refers to function rather than individual history. Jenkins' warnings always prove accurate in ways that suggest prophecy rather than opinion. His fear of flying machines is validated when SpongeBob's contraptions consistently fail. His distrust of city folk is confirmed when urban citizens exploit SpongeBob's helpfulness. His general pessimism reflects realistic assessment of Bikini Bottom's chaotic nature. Jenkins might be chosen specifically for predictive ability, selected from the population based on demonstrated capacity to foresee technological disasters before they occur. The theory connects to Bikini Bottom's other inherited or titled positions. King Neptune rules through divine right. The fry cook position at the Krusty Krab carries specific cultural weight. Mrs. Puff's driving school serves an essential social function. Bikini Bottom operates through defined roles that individuals fill rather than through purely individual agency. Jenkins represents the essential function of skeptical elder, the voice that questions whether change is truly progress, the reminder that traditional ways exist for reasons the young may not understand. Multiple Jenkins appearances in close proximity sometimes occur within the series, with different-looking characters called by the same name. This could be animation inconsistency, or it could be the title system in action. If Jenkins is a designation, multiple people might hold the title simultaneously for different domains. Agricultural Jenkins, Maritime Jenkins, Entertainment Jenkins. Each serves the same social function in different contexts, warning their respective communities about the dangers of newfangled ideas. Old Man Jenkins shouts his warning about city folk and flying machines as SpongeBob crashes to the ground, having successfully destroyed the inflatable pants that allowed flight. The prophecy fulfilled, Jenkins parachutes safely down, his role complete. Another innovation thwarted. Another dreamer returned to Earth. Another cycle of the eternal struggle between progress and tradition resolved in tradition's favor. Jenkins has done his job, whichever Jenkins this might be, and somewhere in Bikini Bottom, the next person to earn the title watches and learns the warnings they will one day deliver. Let's continue with the next theory. The Gary Previous Owner theory. Gary the Snail performs tricks that SpongeBob has never taught him. He demonstrates skills that require years of training to develop. He responds to commands with precision that suggests muscle memory rather than learning. Treats reveals the extent of Gary's capabilities when properly motivated. Archery, weightlifting, bowling, skydiving, sculpture, escape artistry, and motorcycle stunts. SpongeBob reacts to these performances with casual acceptance, giving Gary treats as if watching a snail complete the Houdini water tank escape is perfectly normal. The theory suggests that Gary lived an extensive previous life before SpongeBob adopted him from the pound, a life that included rigorous training from an owner who developed Gary's remarkable abilities. The episode shows Gary's talent progression, accelerating beyond anything SpongeBob could have taught. The sequence begins simply. Gary picks up a ball and throws it. SpongeBob gives him a treat. Then Gary jumps on 5 trampolines, goes through a tunnel, and rolls down a slide. The complexity increases exponentially. Gary performs archery with enough accuracy to earn treats. He lifts a 500-pound weight using only his eye stalks. He bowls a perfect strike. Each skill requires different physical capabilities, different training methods, and different practice time. No single evening of snail bites motivation could produce this range of mastery. The skydiving sequence confirms that Gary has performed these activities before. He jumps from a plane, deploys his parachute at the correct altitude, and lands safely. Skydiving requires training. First jumps happen in tandem with instructors. Solo jumps require certification. Gary executes the jump with the confidence of someone who has done it many times, not the hesitation of a first attempt. Someone taught Gary to skydive. Someone took him up in planes and coached him through the process until it became routine. That someone was not SpongeBob. The marble sculpture Gary reveals demonstrates artistic training that takes years to develop. He pulls back a curtain to show completed work, suggesting he created the piece during the montage. Sculptors study anatomy, proportion, technique, and material properties before producing gallery-worthy pieces. Gary's sculpture earns the same casual treat as his other performances, indicating that SpongeBob has seen Gary's artistic abilities before without questioning their origin. Gary came to SpongeBob already knowing how to sculpt, already having developed the eye stalk dexterity required for fine artistic work. The Houdini escape sequence requires specific knowledge that casual pet ownership wouldn't provide. Gary restrains himself in a straitjacket, submerges in a water tank, and escapes while SpongeBob watches from the audience. This is a professional magic act. Escape artists train for years to perform safely. They learn how to manipulate restraints, control breathing, manage panic, and time their escapes for dramatic effect. Gary knows all of this. He performs the trick like someone who has done it professionally, someone who was trained by a mentor in the escape arts. The motorcycle stunt represents the pinnacle of Gary's mysterious past. He drives a motorcycle over buses, through a ring of fire, and lands on a ramp. Stunt performers build these skills through progressive training, first learning to ride, then learning to jump, then learning to incorporate hazards. Gary executes the complete sequence without hesitation. The buses, the fire ring, and the landing ramp are all prepared for him, suggesting this is a routine he has performed before. Someone built a stunt course for Gary. Someone coached him through increasingly dangerous jumps until he could perform the full sequence. SpongeBob mentions, "I picked you up at the pound while looking at a framed photograph," Gary presents. The pound takes in animals that have been abandoned, lost, or surrendered. Gary didn't come from a breeder or a pet store. He came from a facility that houses animals separated from previous owners. The photograph commemorates the moment of adoption, establishing that Gary existed before SpongeBob, that Gary had a life that ended and a new life that began when SpongeBob chose him. The pound's existence raises questions about Gary's previous circumstances. Why would someone surrender a snail with Gary's capabilities? Trained animals represent significant investments of time and resources. Gary's previous owner developed his archery skills, his athletic abilities, his artistic talents, and his stunt performance capacity. This owner then gave Gary up or lost him in circumstances that led to pound residence. The skills remained even after the owner disappeared. Gary's behavior throughout the series suggests trauma responses consistent with abandonment. He becomes extremely attached to SpongeBob, rarely leaving the house, rarely interacting with others. When SpongeBob shows attention to other pets or interests, Gary reacts with jealousy and anxiety. These patterns match animals who experience loss and fear, repeat abandonment. Gary's previous owner left him, and Gary carries that wound even if he cannot articulate it. His desperate need for snail bites might represent displaced attachment behavior, seeking comfort through food because his previous source of comfort disappeared. The commercial that triggers Gary's obsession shows snails performing tricks for treats. Gary watches these snails with recognition, not curiosity. He knows what training looks like. He knows what treat-based reinforcement feels like. The commercial activates memories of a previous life where treats meant performance and performance meant approval. Gary's subsequent behavior isn't new addiction. It's reactivated patterns from a past he cannot discuss, but clearly remembers. SpongeBob's ignorance about Gary's capabilities suggests he never questioned his pet's background. He doesn't ask how Gary learned to sculpt or where Gary acquired stunt training. He simply provides treats and watches the performances as if they're normal. This acceptance might be SpongeBob's characteristic obliviousness, or it might be deliberate avoidance. Asking about Gary's past might mean acknowledging that someone else loved Gary first, that SpongeBob is a replacement rather than an original owner, that Gary's loyalty comes partly from fear of being abandoned again. The episode ends with Gary immediately calming down when SpongeBob finally says no firmly. This instant behavioral shift suggests Gary was testing boundaries rather than genuinely demanding treats. Trained animals understand commands. They respond to authority. Gary needed SpongeBob to demonstrate the kind of firm, clear communication that his previous owner probably provided. When SpongeBob finally acted like a proper handler, Gary recognized the dynamic and settled into appropriate behavior. The snail wasn't addicted to treats. He was looking for someone to take charge the way his previous owner did. Gary Wilson Jr. has a middle name and a suffix, suggesting formal naming conventions typically associated with family lineage. SpongeBob didn't give Gary this name. It came with him, assigned by a previous owner who viewed Gary as important enough to name properly. Somewhere in Bikini Bottom's past, the original Gary Wilson lived and died or disappeared, and Gary Wilson Jr. was named in his memory. The snail carries his predecessor's legacy along with the training his previous owner provided. Gary the snail sits in SpongeBob's pineapple with a lifetime of skills he cannot explain and memories he cannot share. He came from the pound, which means he came from somewhere else first. He performs feats that require years of dedicated training. He responds to authority with instant obedience when authority is properly asserted. His previous owner gave him everything except permanence, and Gary carries that loss in behaviors. SpongeBob doesn't recognize his grief. The snail who performs Houdini escapes was taught by someone who loved magic. The snail who sculpts marble was trained by someone who valued art. The snail who does motorcycle stunts was coached by someone who understood danger. All of these someones are gone now, and Gary lives with SpongeBob, who accepts the skills without asking questions, providing treats without understanding why his pet can do things no pet should know how to do. Alright, next theory ahead. The French narrator documentation theory. The French narrator opens the very first episode of SpongeBob SquarePants with the voice of someone conducting scientific observation. Ah, the sea. So fascinating. So wonderful. Here, we see Bikini Bottom teeming with life. He identifies specific subjects, home to one of my favorite creatures, SpongeBob SquarePants. He anticipates audience questions. Yes, of course he lives in a pineapple. You silly. This isn't casual narration. This is the methodology of a researcher documenting a subject they have studied extensively, someone who knows their subject well enough to have favorites, someone who expects skepticism and preemptively addresses it. The theory proposes that the French narrator is a scientist recording Bikini Bottom because he understands this ecosystem exists on borrowed time, and his documentation preserves what will eventually be lost. Help Wanted establishes the narrator's scientific framing from the opening moments. He describes Bikini Bottom as teeming with life, language that ecological researchers use when assessing biodiversity. He catalogs the habitat, a brown rock, a moai head, and a pineapple, which each contain inhabitants. This is field observation protocol, identifying shelter types and noting occupancy. He doesn't describe the characters first, he describes their environment, establishing ecological context before introducing individual subjects. Scientists document habitats because habitats determine what life can exist. The narrator knows this. The phrase, "one of my favorite creatures," reveals long-term engagement with the subject matter. Researchers develop favorites through extended observation. They watch subjects over time, learn individual personalities, and form preferences based on behavioral patterns that casual observers wouldn't notice. The narrator has studied Bikini Bottom long enough to develop emotional connections to specific inhabitants. He knows SpongeBob well enough to single him out from the entire population. This familiarity comes from sustained attention, the kind of attention scientists give to ecosystems they're monitoring. The narrator's tone throughout the series carries the weight of someone preserving something fragile. He introduces episodes with contextual framing that establishes time, location, and circumstances. He provides transitions that mark the passage of time. He occasionally interjects with commentary that suggests awareness of larger patterns. His voice conveys affection mixed with something harder to identify, perhaps melancholy, perhaps the resignation of someone who knows their subject's future better than their subject does. Bikini Bottom exists beneath Bikini Atoll, the site of extensive nuclear weapons testing between 1946 and 1958. The United States detonated 23 nuclear devices at this location, including the first hydrogen bomb test. The radiation contaminated the lagoon, the surrounding coral, and the marine life in the area. Real-world Bikini Atoll remains too radioactive for permanent human habitation. The ecosystem, the French narrator documents, exists in an environment fundamentally altered by human activity, an environment that continues to experience the long-term effects of nuclear contamination. The mutations visible throughout Bikini Bottom support the radiation interpretation. Fish talk. Sponges walk. Starfish demonstrate cognitive function. Squirrels survive underwater in containment suits. These aren't natural evolutionary developments. These are the products of an environment where normal biological rules have been suspended by external forces. The French narrator documents a world that shouldn't exist, a world created by catastrophe, a world whose continued existence remains uncertain given the forces that created it. The narrator's scientific detachment occasionally breaks when observing particularly significant moments. In Help Wanted, he watches SpongeBob prepare for the most important day of his life with the careful attention of someone who understands this moment matters. He contextualizes the event. Today's the big day. He knows what SpongeBob is attempting. He knows why it matters. He has been watching long enough to understand the significance of small moments in small lives. The documentary format itself suggests archival intent. Documentaries preserve subjects for future audiences who may not have direct access to what's being recorded. Wildlife documentaries capture endangered species. Historical documentaries preserve events that will never recur. The French narrator's ongoing documentation of Bikini Bottom implies that someone, somewhere, needs this record to exist. Future researchers, future audiences, or simply future generations who want to know what once lived in the waters beneath Bikini Atoll. The narrator's knowledge extends beyond what surface observation would provide. He knows interior layouts of homes. He knows character relationships. He knows daily routines and special occasions. This comprehensive awareness suggests access to the ecosystem that exceeds normal documentary methods. He might have monitoring equipment distributed throughout Bikini Bottom. He might have been observing for decades. He might represent an institutional research effort that began when the nuclear testing started, tracking the long-term effects of radiation on marine life. His French accent connects to the international scientific community that has studied nuclear test sites. French scientists have particular expertise in Pacific nuclear testing effects, given France's own testing program at Mururoa and Fangatafa atolls. The narrator might represent a collaborative international effort to document mutation patterns across different nuclear test sites, comparing Bikini Bottom's developments to other affected ecosystems. His voice carries the weight of global scientific concern about humanity's nuclear legacy. The narrator's occasional humor doesn't contradict the scientific framework. Researchers develop dark humor about their subjects as a coping mechanism. When documenting dying ecosystems, when watching species decline, when recording events that foreshadow extinction, levity becomes survival strategy. The narrator's warmth toward Bikini Bottom's residents, his jokes about pineapple houses, his affection for SpongeBob's optimism, all of this could be a scientist's way of managing the emotional toll of watching something beautiful that won't last. Help Wanted establishes SpongeBob's entrance into the workforce as a pivotal moment. The narrator treats this event with the significance that hiring decisions rarely receive. He documents SpongeBob's preparation, his journey, his trial, and his success. He preserves this day because it represents the beginning of something. A career, a purpose, a life that will unfold across years of subsequent documentation. Scientists record beginnings because beginnings provide baseline data for measuring change. The ecosystem the narrator documents operates on principles that defy normal biology. Underwater fire exists. Characters breathe air and water interchangeably. Physics behaves inconsistently. These anomalies would fascinate any scientist studying mutation effects. The narrator records not just the inhabitants, but the rules they operate under, documenting how radiation has altered fundamental environmental constants in addition to biological forms. Bikini Bottom is a pocket universe where mutation has affected reality itself. The French narrator continues his documentation across hundreds of episodes spanning decades. His dedication to this project exceeds casual interest. He has committed his career, possibly his life, to preserving Bikini Bottom's story. This level of investment suggests he understands something about Bikini Bottom's future that the residents don't. He knows the radiation will eventually overwhelm the adaptations. He knows the ecosystem cannot sustain indefinitely. He knows that someday, Bikini Bottom will fall silent, and only his recordings will testify that it ever existed. The scientist speaks into his recording equipment, watching SpongeBob march toward the Krusty Krab with innocent determination. "I'm ready," the sponge declares, oblivious to the forces that created him and the forces that may eventually destroy him. The narrator preserves this moment, this optimism, this small creature's hope for a future in a world born from apocalypse. Somewhere above the waves, in a research facility or university office, the tapes accumulate. The documentation grows. And when the last mutation finally fails and Bikini Bottom falls quiet, the French narrator's archive will remain. A record of life that flourished briefly in the shadow of humanity's greatest destructive power, fascinating and wonderful until the very end. Alright, let's check the next theory. The sentient moai prison theory. Squidward's house is an Easter Island head, a moai statue that somehow ended up at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean on Conch Street between a pineapple and a rock. The real Easter Island heads remain one of archaeology's enduring mysteries. Massive stone figures carved by the Rapa Nui people, positioned around the island in patterns that continue to generate scholarly debate. Some theories suggest the statues walked to their locations through coordinated rocking movements. Squidville shows Squidward escaping to Tentacle Acres, a community of identical octopus houses, where he expects to find happiness. He discovers instead that conformity creates its own prison, and he rockets away on a reef blower, laughing about freedom. The theory suggests that Squidward's moai house deliberately positioned itself on Conch Street to contain him, and his escape to Tentacle Acres was a temporary break from a prison he doesn't consciously recognize. The episode begins with SpongeBob and Patrick destroying Squidward's house with reef blowers. They suck up windows, doors, and eventually blow the entire structure to pieces. Squidward declares this the final straw and announces his intention to move somewhere he can brag about. His television, fallen among the debris, conveniently turns on to show an advertisement for Tentacle Acres, a gated community specifically designed for octopuses seeking escape from unpleasant neighbors. The timing is impossible. The advertisement matches Squidward's exact words, almost verbatim. Either Tentacle Acres somehow monitors potential residents and targets them with personalized marketing, or something wanted Squidward to see that commercial at that moment. The Tentacle Acres entrance process reveals how seriously the community takes isolation. The guard asks if Squidward is alone, if anyone is with him, if he is now or have you ever been a sponge, and begins asking about Starfish before Squidward cuts him off. These questions function as security screening, ensuring that whatever Squidward is fleeing cannot follow him inside. The gates open to reveal a rainbow and rows of identical houses, each one a copy of Squidward's moai. He has escaped one Easter Island head only to enter a community of Easter Island heads. He has traded one prison for many. Squidward's initial joy at Tentacle Acres follows predictable patterns. He finds canned bread at the grocery store. He discovers an interpretive dance academy. He joins a clarinet trio. Each activity represents something he values: convenience, artistic expression, musical community. The town appears designed to satisfy his exact preferences. But satisfaction becomes routine. Routine becomes monotony. The episode shows Squidward repeating the same sequence, day after day, his enthusiasm draining with each cycle until he sits on a bench, depressed, calling the place too much paradise. The reef blower that enables Squidward's escape connects directly to the reef blower that destroyed his original home. SpongeBob and Patrick's chaos drove him to Tentacle Acres. An unattended reef blower at Tentacle Acres enables his rebellion. The same tool that created his crisis becomes the tool that resolves it. Squidward uses the blower to cause mayhem, sucking up croquet balls, stealing clarinets, rearranging facial features. He rediscovers joy through the exact type of childish behavior he condemned when SpongeBob did it. The prison of conformity breaks when Squidward becomes what he claimed to hate. The mob that chases Squidward mirrors the circumstances that made him leave Bikini Bottom. Annoying neighbors drove him away from Conch Street. Angry octopuses chase him through Tentacle Acres. The pattern suggests that Squidward's problem isn't location but personality. He generates conflict wherever he goes because he cannot tolerate others and cannot exist alone. The moai house on Conch Street might have recognized this truth and positioned itself accordingly, placing Squidward in the one location where his misery would be maximized while his physical needs remained met. Easter Island's actual moai carry cultural significance related to ancestor worship and spiritual protection. The Rapa Nui positioned them facing inland, watching over villages, their backs to the sea. They were guardians, observers, presences that maintained connection between the living and the dead. If Squidward's house retains any of this original purpose, it might view itself as responsible for Squidward's spiritual development. The suffering Squidward experiences on Conch Street could be intentional, designed to teach lessons he refuses to learn. The house watches. The house waits. The house ensures that Squidward remains where growth might eventually occur. The episode ends with Squidward rocketing away from Tentacle Acres, screaming, "Freedom!" while SpongeBob and Patrick fail to recognize him. He escapes the gated community. He escapes the angry mob. He escapes the conformity that made him miserable. But the episode doesn't show where he goes. Presumably, he returns to Conch Street, to the moai head that will be rebuilt, to the neighbors who will continue tormenting him. His freedom is temporary. The prison awaits. Subsequent episodes confirm that Squidward never permanently escapes Conch Street. He attempts to leave multiple times throughout the series. He tries different jobs, different locations, different life circumstances. Each attempt ends with his return to the moai head between the pineapple and the rock. The house always takes him back. The house always waits for him to come home. The pattern suggests something beyond creature of habit. It suggests something that won't let him go. The real Easter Island heads demonstrate remarkable positioning precision. They were placed at specific locations for specific purposes by people who invested enormous resources in their creation and installation. The heads didn't arrive randomly. They were put where they needed to be. Squidward's moai sits on Conch Street with equal intentionality. It chose this location, or was placed here by forces that understood what Squidward needed. Not what Squidward wanted, what Squidward needed. SpongeBob and Patrick's question to various octopuses, "Are you Squidward?" takes on additional meaning in this context. They cannot distinguish Squidward from other members of his species. To them, all octopuses look alike. Squidward's identity, which he guards so preciously, which he believes makes him special, is invisible to those who know him best. The moai house might be the only entity that truly sees Squidward as an individual, the only presence that maintains permanent awareness of who he is and what he requires. The prison is also the only thing that knows him. Squidward's house walked to Conch Street through methods unknown, motivated by purposes unexplained. It established itself between neighbors, guaranteed to cause maximum disturbance. It watches Squidward with stone eyes that never close. It absorbs his clarinet playing, his complaints, his despair. It remains when he leaves and welcomes him when he returns. The Easter Island head has found its purpose, not guarding a village, not honoring ancestors, but containing one octopus who will never find happiness anywhere, ensuring he stays in the one place where his suffering serves some cosmic function even he cannot perceive. Squidward lives in his prison. Squidward sleeps in his prison. Squidward will die in his prison, and the moai will keep watching, patient and eternal, doing whatever ancient stone guardians do when their purpose has been fulfilled. That's it for today. If you want more videos like these, subscribe to our channel and I'll see you in the next one.